is going to be reasonably strong. I see no reason for investors, many of whom are confronting lower rates in other parts of the world amid a pandemic-related economic slowdown, to back away from buying treasuries in the very near term. I think over time, you look out 12 months, yields will probably be higher than here, but that's not without risk and uncertainty. So I think the demand will still be there.
So, RJ, we've had the Fed, step in early, step in fairly aggressively, and I think by most accounts doing a very good job. But clearly, that's not going to be enough for this economy. How important is it to get another round of fiscal stimulus done in the near term?
Well, you're talking to somebody who's primarily, most of my time is spent on U.S. rates and municipals. And on the latter, municipals, those in the muni market overwhelmingly, including issuers and investors, look at the constraints under which state governments live. 49 states have a balanced budget amendment. They have to pass a balanced budget. They don't always get to stick to it in terms of actuals, but the spirit of a balanced budget amendment is very strong. The federal government clearly does not. There's a strong precedent in periods of economic shock or downturn for the federal government to take advantage of its long fiscal and financial rope to assist within the federal system the state governments. And they need somewhat more help. I don't want to be alarmist. I don't believe states are going to default on their debt unless we get more fiscal relief. I like to call it relief, not stimulus. That's not going to happen. States are good credits, but they will be cutting a lot of expenditures to try to balance their stressed budgets, and they'll be raising taxes. That doesn't help an economic recovery, and the federal government has the wherewithal to prevent those outcomes. So I do think, along Chairman Powell's vein of thinking, that more should be done, although I don't think he was particularly adamant yesterday when he testified in front of the Senate committee along those lines. I think he has clearly suggested that's where he thinks the markets should go and where the policymakers, should go.
RJ, which states do you think are going to have to raise taxes in light of the financial burdens they're experiencing right now, at least if they don't get fiscal support?
I wouldn't feel comfortable giving you specific state governments that are going to necessarily go that route, but I'll tell you
Basically, I'm asking you, are my taxes going up substantially? I mean,
you live in Manhattan, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, well, maybe.
All right, so go on.
I hate to say it, but it's very true that this COVID-19 pandemic and the economic challenges that we face, which are profound, are not homogenous across the country. Obviously, the tri-state New York metro area, and I used to live there, so it's got a soft spot in my heart. It's also a huge economic engine for the United States, so it's very important. Heavily afflicted by COVID-19 in so many ways, costs, deaths, and the challenges of the situation there. They're profound there. You go to many other parts of the country, and it hasn't been nearly as bad. I think every state economy went through some degree of a lockdown, shutdown, shelter in place, whatever you want to call it. And that is going to knock state revenues 10, 20, maybe even 30%. But it varies across these states. And I do think that the initial CARES Act response, which was bipartisan and should be praised because it was the right thing to do, gave an initial significant amount of money to state governments. But more does need to be done. And it probably should be scaled more directly to the need. Under the CARES Act, the state of Wyoming is actually getting more money from the CARES Act than they're ever going to lose. It's almost equal to their operating budget, if I recall. So that's not the case in New York, for example, or New Jersey. So I do think that the policymakers in Washington need to be particularly sensitive to where the challenge has been felt the greatest and to try to tailor the next installment, if you will, of federal financial aid to the states somewhat by those needs.
RJ Gallo, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your thoughts and perspective. RJ Gallo, Senior Portfolio Manager, Head of the Municipal Bond Group, and Head of the Duration Committee at Federated Hermes, joining us from Pittsburgh. So, Lisa, I think, as RJ was suggesting, this next round of fiscal stimulus, as we've heard really clearly from Governor Andrew Cuomo, really needs to address state and local municipalities.
Yeah, although I don't know that I feel the urgency right now, certainly not among Republicans. And I'm hearing the conversation turn much more toward tying it to employment, such as a payroll tax cut in order to help support workers on the back end of this crisis.
Yeah, it's interesting just to see how this plays out, but clearly the expectations are that more fiscal stimulus is needed. The question is how much goes directly to consumers and how much goes to state and local governments to support teachers and firefighters and the like. So that is being debated as we speak in the halls of Congress. More to come. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks rebounding this morning as investors are keying in on signs the economy will continue to reopen. The Dow is up around 375 points. The minutes of the Federal Reserve's April policy meeting is out this afternoon. Yesterday, Chairman Jay Powell reiterated during a Senate hearing that the central bank is ready to use all the weapons in its arsenal to help the U.S. economy endure the pandemic. Kroger said it isn't asking any employees to pay back coronavirus-related bonuses. Photos of letters from Kroger asking employees to return some of their emergency pay were circulating on Twitter yesterday. Kroger blamed an accounting error for the letters and said it will inform the employees affected that they don't need to repay any money. And after more than a century, Johnson & Johnson will quit selling its talc-based baby powder in the U.S. and Canada. The company faces thousands of lawsuits alleging that it hid cancer risks in the powder. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
The world's financial decision makers connect on the Bloomberg terminal. The buy side and the sell side together, collaborating across markets and countries in real time, sharing ideas, negotiating trades, and forming an influential network of over 325,000 financial professionals that helps power global markets. Isn't it time you join them? Request a demo at bloomberg.com/professional.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus symptoms and testing. If you have any one of the following symptoms, a high temperature, a new continuous cough, loss of taste or smell, you can now get tested. Do not leave home for any reason other than to get tested. Find out how to get a test and how long to isolate at nhs.uk/coronavirus. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 1991, Chicago Bulls and NBA superstar Michael Jordan is named the NBA's MVP.
Here we are with Michael, surrounded by his mom and his dad, wife. Under the hat, that wasn't fair, but I'm covered with champagne. I can hardly see. Michael, what does it mean to you?
It means so much. I mean, not just for me, but for the team.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Looking for your daily fix of NFL news and analysis?
In that. So we had to blow it up and do Super Bowl predictions instead.
Look no further than the Pick Six podcast, where CBS sports writer Will Brinson gets you up to speed with what's trending in the NFL that day, so that you're always in the know.
Yeah, it's pretty revealing of Brinson's methodology for predictions. When he gets mad at people for predicting good teams are going to win the Super Bowl or good players are going to win major awards, that's how you wind up.
Search Pick Six on TuneIn to listen. With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic Game Replays to start listening. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is,
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we take a look at the U.S.'s increasingly fraught relationship with much of the rest of the world, in particular China, with Secretary of State Michael Pompeo at the helm. Plus, we'll take a look at the changing business models in the wake of the COVID pandemic. Right now, though, let's get a check on those markets. Greg Jarrett has that for us, the Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Lisa, just crossing the Bloomberg terminal, crude oil inventories fell 4.9 million, make that 4.98 million barrels, according to the EIA. Meanwhile, stocks are up. The S&P jumped more than 1.5% after Lowe's and Target reported sales that topped estimates. The index plunged about 1% in the final hour yesterday after a report that cast doubt on the promise of a virus vaccine. Gains are broad, with financials, industrial, and energy groups leading. Check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500 is up 1.7%, up 50. The Dow's up 1.5%, up 373. The Nasdaq is up 1.75%, up 160. The 10-year is down 7/30 seconds with a yield of 0.71%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is up 4.4% at $33.36 a barrel, while COMEX gold is up 0.1% at $17.4760 an ounce. The dollar yen stands at 107.48. The euro $1.0986. And the British pound $1.2262. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It's 10:33 on Wall Street. Time for Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined this morning by Bloomberg Opinion columnist James Gibney. James, thanks so much for joining us here. Interesting essay you have out here about the U.S. State Department. It's certainly been in the news lately with President Trump firing the Inspector General at the State Department. I'd love for you to just kind of step back maybe 30,000 feet and give us a view of what's it like to work in the State Department today. How's the morale?
Well, I think morale has been hit pretty hard, Paul. I think the cumulative toll of 3.5 years of very political management have really dispirited a lot of the career staff. I've heard from some of my former colleagues that actually people are trying to avoid, getting in the firing line and avoiding sort of high-profile assignments if they can, because they just don't want to get caught up in some of the monkey business that's been going on.
So can you put that into perspective of policy and how some of the rank and file and the disappearance of them or the lack of morale actually plays into the U.S.'s actions internationally, especially at a time of the pandemic, of increasingly fraught relations with China, as well as a growing call for coordination going forward?
Sure, Lisa. I think the biggest problem is that if your diplomatic officials don't have confidence that they're going to be backed up by management, that they don't really have a full understanding of what's going on in the highest policy circles, they're not going to do their jobs as well. They're going to be more tentative. They're going to be looking over their shoulders. They're going to be worried about making a mistake. They're going to be worried about getting fired or getting disciplined in some way. And I think that really creates a climate of mistrust that hampers the ability of U.S. diplomats to do their jobs. Now, this administration has really increased the number of political ambassadors to, it's not quite at a historical peak, but it's pretty high. It's also has not put in career officials in the assistant secretary jobs, which are, kind of a senior level position. So I think there are people in the career service who feel like, they're not really well represented, and as a result, they feel like, they're operating in a climate of mistrust.
So let's put this in a perspective of some of the recent developments. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo talked about Taiwan's president, which is a trigger point for China's leadership, who called it wrong and very dangerous. I'm wondering, given the fact that Mike Pompeo has taken on a very political angle recently, how does this play into the end goal of the U.S.-China relationship? Do we have a sense of that?
Well, I think Pompeo is definitely amplifying the administration's or the president's campaign message, which is, he's going to stoke his base by, being very strong against China, being very anti-China. And I think that could, what you want to do when you're dealing with China is you want to tamp down the more antagonistic dialogue and try to, solve your problem in a constructive way. And I think that, accusing the Chinese of spreading the virus deliberately by putting people in airplanes, as Peter Navarro did recently, doesn't help in that regard. So I think that the more political you are in dealing with China, the more aggressive you are in using China for domestic political purposes, the less likely you are to solve some of the issues that the U.S. and China face.
So, James, aside from China, there are a lot of other hotspots in the world, whether we think about North Korea or, some other places, Iran. What's the sense here that, we are at a significant disadvantage here from statescraft in terms of kind of really dealing with these countries in an effective way?
Well, I think the president has made clear that, whether you're talking about North Korea, Venezuela, Iran, China, and Russia, what he's the guy in charge. There's no doubt about that. But he also doesn't pay any attention to the people that he has in the State Department, in the national security community writ large, who could give him more expert advice than he probably is currently taking seriously. So I think that in general, his approach to those crises has been very personal. And, it keeps people guessing. It keeps his own people guessing. But it's not necessarily producing results. On each of those countries you just mentioned, I would argue that we're actually in not much better shape than they were when he took office. And I'd say in many cases we're in worse shape.
James, appreciate your comments. As always, James Gibney, Bloomberg Opinion Editor. You can read James's work at Bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal at OPIN Go for James's work and all the other work of Bloomberg Opinion. And it's interesting, Lisa, I think it's going to be, a challenge here in many areas around the world for the State Department to effectively manage some of these relationships, because there is a lot of political oversight and a lot of political winds kind of impacting what they do.
Yeah, and I got to say, to try to follow which plot line is the important one is so tricky right now, because there's been just a fire hose of news. And of course, this week, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo very much in focus, also with his decision to fire the department's inspector general, the potential of what the inspector general was looking at ahead of time. All of this getting cloaked in a political wrapper, yet very hard to tell the smoke versus the noise. And then President Trump coming out saying that he's taking a couple of drugs that haven't been approved for COVID-19. It just raises a lot of questions as far as how to track the current political cycle at a time of an election, at a time of a pandemic, at a time of a lot of accusations that are gaining steam. So we will continue to delve into them. Coming up, we're going to talk about the changing business environment in the era of the pandemic. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. Martin DeCaro there with World and National Headlines. Martin.
Lisa, as he prepares to visit the state to tour an auto plant, President Trump is threatening to withhold coronavirus relief money for Michigan. In a tweet today, the president erroneously claimed Michigan sent absentee ballots to millions of voters. The state actually mailed applications for the ballots. Trump has vocally opposed voting by mail, claiming without evidence it's ripe for fraud. Other kinds of fraud are surging during the pandemic. That's the warning from the Federal Trade Commission's Noah Phillips.
There are no FDA-approved cures, tests, prevention mechanisms, vaccines.
If someone is telling you that's what they're selling you, it's not true.
He's sending false advertising notifications to dozens of businesses hawking bogus cures. When you eventually return to your workplace, you may have to follow some new strict rules or face discipline. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager explains.
Many businesses are making face masks mandatory based on social distancing guidelines from the Centers for Disease Control, as well as state and local governments that are reopening. Workers who object could be disciplined or fired. Legal experts say they may have little recourse if they try to challenge it. Attorneys tell Bloomberg Law unless there are medical or religious reasons not to wear a mask, they are a safety precaution that should be viewed as a necessary term of employment. Objections on free speech grounds might also not be enough to avoid termination. Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
A father and son charged in Japan with aiding the escape of ex-Nissan chief Carlos Ghosn were picked up in Massachusetts today. Michael and Peter Taylor being held for possible extradition. Ghosn fled Japan last year. Global news 24 hours a day on air and a quick take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Martin DeCaro.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
This Independence Day, it's a...
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
TSB believe in people helping people. So if you need a repayment holiday on your TSB mortgage, loan or credit card, get in touch and TSB will do what they can to help. To apply, go to tsb.co.uk. Interest will continue to apply and you will pay more interest overall. Terms and conditions apply.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Pulls over a man into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
Plays to the 5! Touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just
carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day, I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn. You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn. Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA Show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks have come back from yesterday's late session sell-off. Investors are keen on signs the American economy will continue to reopen, and key retail earnings show signs of resilience. Crude oil is added to its 4-day rally. We look at those numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is up 1.8%, up 53. Dow's up 1.7%, up 414 now, and the NASDAQ is up 1.9%, up 174. The 10-year is down 9/32 with a yield of 0.71%. West Texas Intermediate crude is up 4.25% at 33.31 a barrel, with COMEX gold little changed at 17.4480 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.49. The euro's $1.993, and the British pound $1.2264. Thinking about flying anytime soon? Delta has boosted the number of flights it will restore to service in June and July to allow for spacing among passengers as demand increases. The carrier indicates it'll add 200 flights in June and may add as many as 300 in July. Delta is up 5.8%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, we've heard from a number of analysts how the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated trends already in effect ahead of this virus and its spread. There's a question of what things will look like and how quickly these transformations can occur. Terry Jones, the perfect person to address this, the founder and former chief executive officer of Travelocity.com, founding chair of Kayak.com, current author of Disruption Off, the technological disruption coming for your company and what to do about it, a new book that's out. I'm wondering, Terry, from your perspective, what do you think is the main change that's being accelerated right now that we should really keep an eye on?
Well, certainly e-commerce shipments up 50%, and surveys show people aren't going back. Instacart hiring 300,000 people, so food delivery looks like isn't going back. A Gartner survey showed almost 75% of companies say even after a vaccine, many workers will still stay home. So we're continually become more digital. Telemedicine got approved, right? People are doing it. I'm on the board of a remote education program that gives second chances to workers to train them how to be engineers. Our business is booming. Other things are tough. I'm a public speaker. Events are gone, right? So I'm building a TV studio in my office, and hopefully I can become virtual. So we're seeing, I think, the digital part of this change is going to be the biggest part of it.
So, Terry, how about some of the, more existing or traditional lines of business, whether it's bricks and mortar retail or leisure, restaurants and things like that? What are some of the risks associated with some of those businesses, do you think? Is this just kind of an acceleration of maybe what was already happening?
I think so. I suspect some restaurants will come back as ghost kitchens, right? And just those kitchens that just deliver. Retail obviously is taking a hard hit, and we're seeing some bankruptcies there. I think other traditional businesses may relook at their supply chains and go back to something from the 19th century, stockpiling, right? Instead of long supply chains, people are moving to 3D printers to get around supply chain issues. And we're seeing traditional businesses. I have a friend who's getting his groceries delivered by a little drone that drives down the street. That was prohibited before. Now it's allowed. So regulations are changing to allow business to change because of social distancing.
I want a little drone delivering my groceries, Terry. I'm wondering.
Pretty cool.
It can be. It depends what the drone looks like and what it does to my home. But Terry, I am curious about your experience with Travelocity.com and Kayak.com at a time when a lot of people don't want to get on an airplane, are not going very far from home. What kind of transformation do you expect there at a time of possibly the biggest disruption ever seen in the travel industry?
Well, absolutely. I ran Travelocity after 9/11, and that was extremely difficult. Travel came back. People got used to security. I think they're going to need trust, and airlines and hotels are working hard on that in terms of cleaning, in terms of social distancing, contacting masks. It's all a big hassle. But I think as the airlines build trust, and you just announced Delta is putting on more flights, people will come back. We're already seeing that in China. It's going to take time. I think we'll see more road travel this year, much more. RV rentals are up 400% because it's your own hotel and your own restaurant. So I think we'll see close to home travel first. And plus, a lot of countries are still closed to us. Canada, we can't go to Europe. The EU is closed right now. So until those countries open, and they open convinced that, America is safe to travel, we're going to see some restrictions we didn't see before. It's going to be very difficult for some hotels and certainly for cruise lines.
So, Terry, how about just in terms of consumer behavior? Do you expect consumers to be similar to maybe what was experienced after the Depression? I know my parents' generation, they were children of the Depression, and I think that infused with them for their entire lives a real sense of fiscal conservatism. Do you think we might see something like that in terms of consumer behavior and consumer spending going forward?
Well, I read a survey recently that said we might, that people are saying they would save more, which would be difficult for us as a consumer nation. We don't want to become a nation of savers necessarily like Japan because our economy isn't set up that way. However, we're seeing in Singapore and China, shopping is coming back, albeit slowly. So I think businesses have to take this time to look at their business model and say, those changes I've been putting off, maybe I need to make them. Maybe I need to go online more. Maybe I need to look at some of these new technologies. Principally, need to experiment in this new world and see what works. Because what worked before won't necessarily work now, and this is a very good time to look at your business model, look at new technology, and say, what might change and how should I change?
One change that a lot of people have been talking about is the shift away from the office. Everyone's working from home. There has been a lot of discussion about commercial real estate and what that means there, as well as a shift away from urban centers. As a former chief executive officer, how much credence do you give these proclamations that the office is going to be substantially smaller and possibly outside of cities?
Well, I think it really depends on the industry. My son is in the video game business. There are 5,000 people. They had a prohibition against working from home. Now they're all working from home and say they're more productive. Call centers are shifting home permanently. Other creative businesses, I don't think it will happen. Plus, remember, even if you keep some of the workers home, you're going to need twice as much space to go into the office for the workers you have because of distancing. So at least in the near term, I don't think we're going to see a hit to real estate because people need the space. And some businesses are doing well because of this. I'm on the board of Sonic Wall, which sells firewalls and internet security. Our business is doing very well because people at home need security, so they're buying more products. So those kind of businesses, telemedicine, remote education, are doing well. I think it's a trend, though. I think many people are saying, hey, this works for many of my employees. I may not go back to the office over time.
Hey, Terry, thanks so much for joining us. Fascinating discussion here as we think about how the world may change as on the back end of this pandemic, including the consumer. Lots to talk about there. Terry Jones, he's a founder and former CEO of Travelocity.com, also the founding chairman of Kayak, and also the author of a latest book, Disruption Off, joining us here. Lisa, I think it's fascinating here to think about really how, or if and how, and to what degree the consumer behavior is going to change on the back end of this. Will we go to restaurants? Will we go to movie theaters? Will we get on planes? It's going to be fascinating to see how this evolves, over the next, year or two.
I would argue, just based on anecdotal experience, the working from home experiment really breaks down into several different camps, mainly those with children and those without children. And I do have to wonder how much that's going to affect the conversation around whether people go back to the office or not.
Yeah, exactly. I think I know which camp you fall in.
No, it's talking from personal experience.
Exactly right. Let's get a quick data check here. They say S&P strong day in the market here. S&P up 50, Dow Jones up 395 points, NASDAQ up 170 points. That's 1.9%. This is Bloomberg.
At the start of every day,
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working-safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
TSB believe in people helping people. That's why they've created TSB Smart Agent, a new secure way for TSB to answer your personal and business banking questions online. Find out more at tsb.co.uk. Automated service available 24/7. TSB partners available 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday to Friday.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is, we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of active...
Round the bases with the StatCast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike just to go over the first couple of picks, Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
How do you kind of view the volatility in the marketplace here?
What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
Companies across the board, across industries, really trying to shore up their balance sheets.
A lot of economists are just throwing up their hands and saying, we don't know.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
There's only so much that you can speed up vaccine development. Because of all the dislocations, there's always relative value trades that you could be doing.
This could be a U-shaped recession rather than a V-shaped recession.
It's the uncertainty, I think, that is really spooking everyone.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, we dig into the promise of a vaccine. It sent Moderna shares up to record highs, surging, allowing them to sell some stock. Now it is down. We discuss. Plus, we take a look at retailers big getting bigger. Right now, though, let's head over to our own Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Lisa, stocks are higher. The S&P jumped more than 1.5% this morning after Lowe's and Target reported sales that topped estimates. The index plunged about 1% in the final hour yesterday after a report cast doubt on the promise of a virus vaccine. Gains are broad, with financials, industrial, and energy groups all leading. We look at those numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is up 1.7%, up 50. The Dow's up 1.6%, up 376. And the Nasdaq's up 1.9%, up 179. The 10-year is currently down 8/30 seconds with a yield of 0.71%. West Texas Intermediate crude is in the green, up 4.1% at 33.27 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 0.2% at 17.4850 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.42. The euro $1.995, and the British pound $1.2274. When employees return to work at J.P. Morgan Chase, their coffee mugs and pictures of the kids won't be where they left them. The bank's been placing the workers' personal items in sealed boxes to prepare the desks for common use after the lockdowns tied to the pandemic begin to ease. Now, what they are saying as well, that when they do come back, they expect the offices will only be half full at the most for the foreseeable future. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
We appreciate that very much. Right now, we're looking at the markets, green on the screen once again here. And I think the interesting thing here is that these small cap stocks are outperforming once again. Let's get a sense of what's going on in the world of small caps. Welcome Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave.
Well, Paul, one thing you can say right off the top is that the Russell 2000 index is up 3.3%, sort of narrowing its gap with the S&P 500 this year, given that the index for larger companies is only higher by 1.7% today. The Russell's sharpest gain by far belongs to Phunware, whose ticker is PHUN. The provider of mobile marketing software is up 158%. Phunware agreed to work with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise to serve healthcare companies. Terms of that deal weren't disclosed. Green Plains, ticker GPRE, has gained more than 26.5%. The ethanol producer was raised to buy from hold at Jefferies, which more than doubled its 12-month share price estimate to $16. Green Plains at the moment at $8.89. Carriage Services, ticker CSV, is up about 22%. The funeral home owner posted first quarter earnings and revenue that beat analysts' average estimates in a Bloomberg survey. One of the Russell's steepest drops belongs to Cryoport, ticker CYRX. The maker of cryogenics equipment has fallen almost 14%. Cryoport is raising $100 million in a sale of convertible notes. And Forescout Technologies, ticker FSCT, has lost 7.5%. The cybersecurity company filed a lawsuit to force private equity firm Advent International to complete a $1.9 billion buyout. The deal was put on hold on Monday.
Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, thank you for that small cap update. I always look forward to it, as you know. My favorite segment of the day. Right now, let's shift gears and talk about a possible remedy to the COVID-19 pandemic. There is a question of the vaccine. Moderna coming out with early stage study results that were promising, sent those shares surging, then came down. And now perhaps there is an increasing focus on treatments, not necessarily the vaccine. Sam Fazeli's been covering it all, director of research for the EMEA region from Bloomberg Intelligence, but also, and more importantly, as Paul likes to point out, a longtime pharmaceutical research analyst. Sam, which should we be placing the greater emphasis on, the vaccine or the treatment to this virus?
Hi. So obviously the vaccine is what will be the ultimate thing that saves us from having to worry about catching the virus. But while we're waiting for a vaccine to be effective and we are still getting infections, I think a treatment is clearly needed to reduce the burden of the disease and how long people stay in hospitals. Now, that's already been coming down a bit, obviously, because of all the lockdown procedures. But as that unlocks, then you still have the risk that you'll get clusters of infections, and patients will need therapies to reduce their how bad their disease is when they're in hospital.
So, Sam, I know we've just in the news, we've heard a lot about Gilead's remdesivir, but Roche also has some possibilities as well. What is Roche looking at?
Yeah, so a lot of companies are trying a whole bunch of stuff at this. This is a little bit like throwing spaghetti to see which one sticks. Roche has actually got a drug that is used and approved for something called cytokine release syndrome, which is, as it probably sounds, pretty bad, which happens when you treat patients with cancer with a particular type of therapy. And that's obviously really bad because it's what causes the organ problems in the lungs, the kidneys, the heart, perhaps. So what that drug's approved for already in that setting is to reduce that risk. So there has been a few anecdotal studies that have shown that it seems to do the same for COVID-19 moderate to severe patients. And now that's in a big trial to try and understand whether that really is true and whether it pans out in a proper prospectively designed trial, which we'll find out by June.
Sam, I'm struggling to understand what type of treatment matters to the market. I mean, people really seem to rally around remdesivir, and yet that's given intravenously for 5 days in a hospital to extremely sick patients. I'm wondering how much that moves the mark versus, say, a potential treatment that someone could buy at a drugstore that could stave off the early effects before getting to the hospital.
Right, so that is an excellent question. At the end of the day, we're going to have to wait and see which of these other drugs can give us that. But what you need for that, for sure, is something that at least is either delivered as a single injection, if it's going to be IV, or oral product. And there are several oral drugs that are being tested, some rheumatoid arthritis drugs from Lilly, and some drugs that are currently used for cancer from AbbVie and AstraZeneca. But they all have their relative levels of toxicity, and those are the sorts of things that when you test them a little bit earlier on in the disease, they may be able to help, but I doubt until we get a specific antiviral, which is a while away.
So, Sam, it sounds like a lot of the pharmaceutical companies and the drug companies are trying to use existing drugs, whether it's for malaria or something else, and try to repurpose them for COVID. Are there also some of these biotechs out there, kind of in the lab trying to come up with something new specific for this virus?
Yeah, sure. There are lots of smaller biotechs with potential antiviral drugs that they've been developing, that they're testing, and some specifically. So what we want is an antiviral drug that you can take once you've been tested positive for the virus that keeps the virus at bay. So there are a whole host of companies that are testing that, and antivirals that they've had in the bag before, or ones that they're working on now. Pfizer is one that's got a lead molecule that they think is going to be potentially useful. But again, that's in the lab. We need to see some human data.
Sam Fazeli, thanks so much for joining us. As always, we value your thoughts here as we talk about this pandemic and treatments and potentially vaccines. Sam Fazeli, Director of European Research for Bloomberg Intelligence, also a senior healthcare analyst. He is based in London, but he's located somewhere these days in France. I don't know. Some people lock down better than others. I think Sam's got it wired. He's somewhere in the French countryside. So I'm stuck here in New Jersey.
Some people lock down better than others. That is
Yes.
the quote for 2020.
Exactly.
Some people lock down better than others. Hashtag
Exactly right.
2020.
Hashtag 2020. So we'll see. But again, a lot of focus on this market about potential treatments and vaccines and that's all kind of geared towards that argument of getting economies reopened. We'll have more. This is Bloomberg.
Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Haig, Martin DeCaro there. Martin.
Hello, Lisa. The coronavirus may be mutating. Chinese doctors report the virus is manifesting differently among patients in its new cluster of cases in the Northeast region compared to the original outbreak in Wuhan. This could complicate China's efforts to end the outbreak there. The new patients appear to carry the virus for a longer period of time and take longer to test negative. In the United States, all 50 states have reopened to one degree or another. Nationally, coronavirus infections are slowing down. The patchwork nature of the attempts to climb out of the economic abyss is revealing big discrepancies among states and within them. San Francisco Mayor London Breed says it's okay for her city to move slower than others in California.
The worst thing we can do at this time is move too quickly and then see that curve spike up tremendously, and then we not have the hospital capacity to handle it.
The CDC quietly released the guidance the White House had first rejected. The 60-page document provides specific instructions for schools, day camps, restaurants, childcare centers, as well as mass transit systems hoping to resume some service. With polls showing the majority of Americans disapprove of President Trump's handling of the pandemic, presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden is mocking Trump's claim that he's taking an unproven drug, hydroxychloroquine, as a preventive measure.
It's like saying maybe if you injected Clorox into your blood, it may cure you. Come on, man. What is he doing?
Today, the president will tour a Ford auto plant near Detroit where medical devices are being made. Global news 24 hours a day on air, and a quick take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
What began in China has expanded worldwide.
Is it China that's going to lead that consumer recovery?
What have we learned?
I'm curious as to what you're monitoring most closely in the news flow.
What can we predict?
Are you seeing a time when you can expect recovery in global travel?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
Do people realize that those numbers are going to get a lot worse?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To buy your home, you became a house-hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org. Because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
"Only you can prevent wildfires."
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
If knowledge is power,
Switch on Acorn TV, the brand new streaming service featuring world-class TV from Britain and beyond. Watch exclusive premieres like the colourful crime drama Queens of Mystery.
Once you have eliminated the impossible,
Whatever remains, however improbable,
must be the truth.
And fan favourites like Inspector George Gently.
I'm just an old copper doing his job.
If you love drama with a little mystery thrown in, enjoy 30 days free with code ACORN30. Then just $4.99 a month. No adverts, no contract, cancel anytime. Join online today at acorn.tv.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £63 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 21st of May to play in the June draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16+. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the USwitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Typical Danny. Imagine trying to unwind at a spa weekend and you wind up getting your mud pack all over your fave personalised dressing gown. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are up, and Facebook is one of the leaders of the charge, right now up over 5%. Investors have been whipsawed by conflicting news regarding a possible vaccine for the virus, as many governments around the world ease lockdowns, even as the pandemic continues to spread, and Brazil is now the world's hotspot for new infections. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500's up 1.8%, up 53. Dow's up 1.7%, up 405, and the Nasdaq's up over 2%, up 184. The 10-year is down 8.30 seconds with a yield of 0.71%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is currently up 2.7% at $32.82 a barrel, with COMEX gold up 0.25% at $17.50 tan per ounce. The dollar yen 107.44, the euro $1.990, the British pound $1.2263. Now the surprise of spring. It's the spring selling season. It's not been normal. Buyers returning to the housing market have been battling over very few available properties. While sales are way down, the lack of inventory has propped up prices and led to bidding wars, even as economic fallout from the pandemic mounts and real estate agents adjust to new public health guidelines that have made it more difficult to market and show homes. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, there's been a lot of concern about the consumer here on the heels of the pandemic, and we're seeing that in some of the retail numbers coming out, some brutal retail sales. But certain retailers are actually doing quite well. We had some really solid top-line numbers out of Target and Lowe's today. To break down what's going on in the world of U.S. retail, we welcome Seema Shah. She's a director of consumer and retail trends at Credit Intel based in New York. Seema, thanks so much for joining us again. Let's just start with the big box. Great, appreciate it. The big box retailers, Target and Lowe's. Mm-hmm. What did you take away from there? What should investors really be focusing on?
I think what we saw from Target, Lowe's, and Walmart and Home Depot yesterday is that the essential retailers, the ones that were able to keep their doors open, even if they had to meter customers in and manage their store traffic, we saw their comps go up about low double digits, let's say 10 to 12% across those names. And significantly, they saw a huge surge in their online sales. So these guys tended to do well because they were open and they were selling what customers needed at that time, which was essential merchandise. And I would say all of them commented on the fact that ending April and going into Q2, they saw an acceleration in their sales, likely due to some of the stimulus money hitting consumers' wallets. But that trend has sort of continued the first 2 weeks of May. But the retailers that weren't essential, like Kohl's and Urban Outfitters, the story was much different.
So there seems to be this consolidation of power among these big retailers, and they're continuing to branch out into an increasing number of avenues. I'm just wondering if you can give some insight into the costs that they are bearing in order to continue business right now. In other words, either paying some of their employees more, whether it's an increasing charge for deliveries. What are we seeing there?
You're definitely seeing a huge investment, I would say, across the board by these retailers into their workers, their associates, and that includes, maybe, temporary increase in health benefits, paid time off, higher wages. So that definitely impacted the margins, I would say, of these retailers across the board. The total value varied depending on the retailer, but I would say a lot of the costs that you saw for Q1 really had to do with making sure employees and customers were safe and healthy. And I think going forward, as things open up, some of those costs will remain, particularly the cost to keep the stores clean and safe and whatnot as people come back to the stores. So there is that shift and there is a lot of cost. But the other cost they face is the acceleration of certain omni-channel investments or certain initiatives that maybe they were going to do in 2 to 3 years that they had to accelerate, like curbside pickup or, trying to maybe same-day delivery, things like that they wanted to offer to their customers in order to get that sale and for customers who are uncomfortable about going into the store.
Seema, what's the status of the supply chain here? There were some concerns that, supply of product from certain parts of the world and transportation would hamper some of the retailers. What are they seeing or what are they telling you about their supply chains now and going forward?
So going now, things seem to have normalized a bit. Product, let's say like something like electronics or product that's still coming from China, there's still a little bit of a lag. But I think most of the retailers have been saying that their vendors have been working with them to increase production and work on improving in-stock levels, particularly for high demand items. So it is slowly getting better as things have sort of calmed down and stores are reopening. There's definitely less out of stocks you're seeing across the board. But going forward, it might have implications as to where these companies source some of their products, even their vendors, right? Maybe you don't want to have everything international. There might be more thought to have some domestic production. So I think we might see changes over the long term as to how people think about their supply chain.
So moving away from the big mainstay retailers that sell what everybody needs, let's go to some of those that have really been struggling, the brick and mortar that are filing for bankruptcy. Neiman Marcus perhaps exemplifies it the best. We were talking last year about how they were investing in the experience of shopping. They are now bankrupt. I'm wondering whether the experience is dead.
It's not, I don't know that the experience is dead as such, but I think some of these guys got into the experience business too late. And many of them were already sort of on very fragile ground before COVID hit, and it's just accelerated that. JCPenney is another example of one which had been sort of hanging out, and then just couldn't go any longer when they finally had to shut down their stores for an extended period of time. And I think that's what you saw across the department store space, and even with some specialty guys. Pier 1 did file for bankruptcy, but is now closing a bunch of their stores and liquidating because it's not likely that they'll be able to come out. So I think there's situations like this that were company specific because they were too slow to catch on to what consumers wanted ahead of time. I think there still is demand for luxury product and specialty merchandise, but the experience has to be good. And I think now you had to have been top of mind before this hit in order to not end up where Neiman Marcus and some of these other guys did.
Just 20 seconds. Who's getting experience right now?
Well, with most stores open, I'm not sure that anybody has a good experience right now, but I would think that some of the mass guys and, who have already worked on their stores and have added different kinds of features and different fulfillment options are probably providing the best experience for customers. But I think as a whole, it is a different experience because of limiting of how many consumers are in the store at once, different closure times. So the whole thing is different, but I think those retailers that had already been investing over the long term on fulfillment, trying to understand what their consumers wanted in omnichannel, they're providing the best experience as we speak right now.
Seema Shah, Director of Consumer and Retail Trends at Credit Intel. Thank you so much for being with us. The experience is currently walking from the bathroom to the bedroom to the kitchen. I'm Lisa Abramowitz, along with my co-host and colleague Paul Sweetie. This is Bloomberg Markets.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The Dow surging, rising more than 400 points. We'll hear from the Federal Reserve leader today as it releases minutes from last month's policy meeting. They'll offer insight into policymakers' deliberations as they voted to hold interest rates near zero. President Trump announced rules for a $19 billion coronavirus farm aid package. Farmers who suffered a 5% or greater price loss will be eligible for direct payments of as much as $250,000 per person. Oil right now, $32 a barrel. The oil market is in much better shape than it was a month ago. Output cuts have kicked in and pockets of demand have emerged. There was no repeat of April's plunge below zero when the West Texas Intermediate contract rolled over. And Spotify signed a deal with comedian and TV host Joe Rogan, gaining exclusive rights to his podcast. Signing Rogan is a win for the company, which has invested hundreds of millions of dollars in original podcasts over the past few years. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Bloomberg and Eaton Vance are proud to present a Boston Pop salute to our heroes. This Independence Day, the orchestra's 4th of July tradition continues. The program will feature guest artists, highlights from past fireworks displays, new music paying tribute to the heroes of the current health crisis, and honoring the memories of those we have lost. Watch and listen Saturday, July 4th, starting at 8 Eastern, exclusively on Bloomberg Television and right here on Bloomberg Radio. In-depth analysis, concise report.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. To stay alert, you must remain at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit your contact with other people. If you have to go out, keep your distance from others, 2 meters apart where possible. Continue to wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Thanks to National Lottery players, The Emerald Centre are now providing emergency food supplies and support for people in Bedfordshire like Alan. Thank you. And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects in England and across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The NHL is always on the ice with these awesome hockey podcasts on TuneIn. Get your goal with the Spittin' Chicklets podcast.
Brian Yandel, Keith Yandel, thanks for coming on. What's going on?
Nothing much. Glad to be here. You guys got some nice digs here.
We heard you took Southwest 2-stop flight to get out here.
Yeah, well, just...
Carve up the ice with NHL at the rink.
The other day I wrote a story. Artemi Panarin, Semyon Varlamov, Sergei Bobrovsky, they all helped arrange for the purchase of N95 masks to benefit hospitals in their respective markets. This is another one of those positive stories you're seeing.
Or create your own power play with Locked On NHL.
All these teams invested future assets to take a run at the Stanley Cup right now. Like, all of those teams would have a real serious gripe, like trading these multiple first-round picks to make a run at a cup. You're right.
Discover these and more NHL podcasts right here on TuneIn. Hit the court anytime with these great NBA podcasts on TuneIn. The Low Post.
So what struck you about this potential head-to-head matchup? What did we learn now that Zion is involved and LeBron and Zion go at each other for the first time?
I still think both teams have to figure out kind of who are their guys when they get into a fourth quarter. I think you saw that with both of them. There were some kind of odd moments.
The Ringer NBA show.
Who ended up winning the thing. But I did watch for a little bit when it was DeAndre Ayton and Zach LaVine playing against each other. And then as the days went on, Devin Booker was involved. Tell me you've seen the clip of Devin Booker when I can't remember who his opponent was.
Or the Haber Show.
At the end, it's because I worked in the NBA in a front office, and when I was 14 years old, my family moved back from Sudan to America. I jumped high school here in New York
Find these and more NBA podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we're going to have JetBlue Airways CEO Robin Hayes. He was on Bloomberg Television earlier today with Guy Johnson. We'll have his thoughts on the company's outlook and the airline landscape. Plus, we're going to take a look at the growing position of the private equity industry in healthcare. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
All stocks are back after yesterday's late session sell-off. We check the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500's up 1.9%, up 56. Dow's up 1.8%, up 430. The Nasdaq's up 2.2%, up 203. The 10-year is down 6/30 seconds with a yield of 0.70%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 3.5% at $33.10 per barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.4% at $17.51.90 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.37. The euro $1.994, and the British pound $1.2261. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
We've talked a lot about the collapse in the airline industry. We are starting to see some signs of a resurgence in people traveling around. Earlier today, JetBlue Chief Executive Officer Robin Hayes spoke with Bloomberg's Guy Johnson, where he discussed the changing demand for flights and what he forecasts for the industry going forward. Let's take a listen.
Since the beginning of April, we've been bumping along the bottom. We're now bumping off the bottom. One of the things I look at every morning is the TSA data that shows how many people flew through the checkpoints the day before. And, as an industry now, we're seeing about 8 to 10% of what we would normally see. So we've definitely seen some small improvements. We think in June there's going to be more demand for flying from May. We're seeing that in some of our forward bookings. Again, we're very cautious. But we expect to fly our June schedule probably between 70 to 75% of what down of what we'd normally fly, whereas in May we were flying 85 to 90% down on what we would normally fly.
And what kind of traffic is it? Like, is it the kind of visiting friends and relatives kind of traffic? Is it leisure traffic? Is there any business travel in there?
Yes, well, there's still a lot of essential workers flying around, medical personnel, people in the distribution business, definitely some visiting friends and family, people returning back to the Northeast who left the Northeast just before this pandemic broke. So it's a real mix. And we're also seeing into the summer some small interest in vacation travel as well. And we're talking to a number of sort of our vacation markets, particularly in the Caribbean, to understand better their opening plans.
You don't see a lot of business traffic, and you've certainly been trying to change that over the last couple of years. Is business the last to come back? Do you see business coming back in anything like the same way that it did before?
Yeah, I think business will come back more slowly. I think that we're all sort of finding things like this are worth a lot better than we thought. We're about 80% leisure, 20% business. I feel good about where JetBlue is. I mean, we have a largely domestic network. The international flights that we do have tend to be close to home. I still think there's going to be a concern for a while, people traveling too far from home. I think we're going to see some different quarantine rules get put in place around the world that's going to confuse people. So I think business travel will come back a little bit more slowly. I think probably on business routes where we may fly 8 to 10 a day, we'd be flying maybe 3 or 4 for a while until demand comes back.
What about transatlantic? You continue to say that it's going to happen in 2021.
Yes.
Is it now late 2021?
It's later 2021. We are still committed to do it. I mean, we think that actually by late 2021, demand between Europe and the US should be largely back to where it was. And we're going to have the same old problems of legacy airlines gouging people with very high fares. So we still see a great opportunity for us to come in and make significant price reductions.
When you look at what is happening with that transatlantic story, Gatwick, a number of airlines have withdrawn from Gatwick and are retrenching back to Heathrow. Certainly seeing that with the likes of Virgin. Virgin is under stress. Do you see the possibility of extra slots becoming available?
Yes, I mean, we've always said we see the path into more than one London airport, and I see an even wider and brighter path now than I did then.
What happens in Q4 if things don't get going again? If we haven't seen a pickup later this year, how do you react? How do you reposition the airline at that point?
So, I mean, we've always had a low-cost structure. We've always, I think, been very careful about how we plan for growth. We have a relatively simple fleet. As I said earlier, we have a network that is largely U.S. domestic, or the international we have tends to be Caribbean, Central, a little bit of Latin America. We don't have any wide-bodied airplanes. So we do believe that these are the businesses that will come back first. Having said that, I still think it's highly likely that when we get to October, we're going to be a smaller airline, a smaller industry, and we're going to attempt to do everything we can to manage that through voluntary means. JetBlue's never furloughed a crew member in our 20-year history. We're proud of that. We'd like to continue that. But we also recognize that we are going to be smaller. We've had great success already. About 14,000 of our 23,000 crew members have taken some form of voluntary time off. And that's really helped us get through this in a way that is sustainable.
That was JetBlue CEO Robin Hayes speaking earlier today with Bloomberg's Guy Johnson on Bloomberg Television. Really interesting, Lisa, here. I mean, the traffic's starting to slowly come back. We heard from Mr. Hayes about that, and he expects, I guess, a slow build for the remainder of this year into next year.
I'm looking right now at the Transportation Security Administration's checkpoint travel numbers for the recent past weeks versus the prior year, the same period. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's rising, but off of basically nothing. I mean, the traveler numbers are really meager. I'm looking right now, for example, on May 19th, that would be yesterday, 190,000 travelers, plus or minus, went through TSA checkpoints versus 2.3 million a year ago on the same day. And again, I mean, you've got to think we're getting up to the 3-day weekend. This typically has been a period where people would go on vacation and enjoy the weather, which is beautiful. How many people are flying? Are you?
No, absolutely not. And, you can just kind of track it. I like to track planes in the air. There's lots of cool apps for that. And the skies are just remarkably empty. Even in this airspace around here, which is some of the densest airspace on the planet, just, nobody flying. And that kind of goes to the TSA numbers. That goes to the data that Robert Hayes from JetBlue was just mentioning. They were down at the peak, 90% of their schedule not running. So only running at about 10% capacity, starting to inch that up a little bit. But it's going to be interesting to see when consumers really want to get back on a plane.
I love that that's a hobby of yours. And it truly is. I mean, you said this before even the COVID-19 pandemic. You like tracking planes on apps. I love it.
I do. Yeah, I do. It's a lot of fun, and it's a great part of the world to do it in. I mean, we're kind of anytime you look up, you see a plane around here, but not so much these days. So we'll have to see how that develops. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines with Martin DeCaro. Martin, what do you have for us?
Paul, President Trump is falsely accusing Michigan election officials of attempting statewide voter fraud. On the day he plans to visit the state to tour a Ford auto plant, Trump tweeted the state sent absentee ballots to millions of voters. Michigan mailed the applications for the ballots. The president threatened to hold up coronavirus relief money for Michigan. When the president does visit the Detroit area car plant, now repurposed to manufacture ventilators, it's unclear if he's going to wear a protective mask.
I don't know. I haven't even thought of it. It depends. I mean, in certain areas I would, in certain areas I don't. But I will certainly look at it.
Ford Motor Company has notified the White House masks are required in its plants. The White House says the president is tested for the coronavirus every day and he's okay. The U.S. pandemic death toll just surpassed 92,000 people, according to the Johns Hopkins tally. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is denying he recommended the firing of the department's Inspector General, Steve Linick, because he himself was being investigated.
There are claims that this was for retaliation, for some investigation that the Inspector General's office here was engaged in. It's patently false.
Pompeo declined to say why he wanted Linick out. Democrats have suggested the firing was tied to investigations into Pompeo's efforts to expedite arms sales to Saudi Arabia. A father and son charged in Japan with aiding the escape of ex-Nissan chief Carlos Ghosn were picked up in Massachusetts today. Michael and Peter Taylor are being held for possible extradition. Global news 24 hours a day on air and a quick take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Martin DeCaro.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect valuable data for land management.
I founded Paratrees back in 2016, taking what I learned from my research at NJIT and migrating it to a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations, so we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
The world's finest
financial decision makers can...
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working-safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for a favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
While he was gone, Al had some kind of vote to make him the managing. You remember he used to come up all the time in the Raiders game that he was the managing general partner. By the way, don't forget, there was a lot going on in Munich. You know how tired that man was to come back and find out that Al Davis had strong-armed his team from him while he was gone?
Search The Right Time with Bomani Jones to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Stay on top of everything happening in the pro wrestling universe with the Body Slamming podcasts on TuneIn. For passionate recaps of the most recent SmackDown to a pro wrestler's perspective on life and culture at large, search sports and scroll down to the world of wrestling to listen. Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier. That also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is,
or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks have come back from yesterday's late session sell-off as investors focus on signs the American economy will continue to reopen, and some key retail earnings showed signs of resilience. Crude oil is added to its 4-day rally. We look at those numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. S&P is up 1.9%, up 56. The Dow's up 1.8%, up 428, and the Nasdaq's up 2.2%, up 201 now. The 10-year is down 430 seconds with a yield of 0.7%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 3.8% at $33.17 a barrel, with COMEX gold up 0.4% at $17.5280 an ounce. The dollar yen, 107.40. The euro, $1.0988. The British pound, $1.2268. A Facebook rally has pushed shares of that social media company to a record today. Facebook was up as much as 6%, extending a winning streak to the 5th consecutive day. Let me take a look and see if I can tell you what Facebook's doing right now. It's currently up 5.9% at $229.69 per share. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
In this pandemic era, there's been a growing focus on private equity's involvement in the healthcare and hospital sector in terms of its normal business model and how that affects the delivery of care. Joining us now is Heather Perlberg, a private equity reporter for Bloomberg, who wrote a story about some of the consequences of that. Heather, can you just start off by giving us a sense of how significantly private equity has invested in the healthcare space over the past few years?
Hi, yeah. I mean, private equity has poured billions and billions of dollars into healthcare broadly. I mean, they're buying up physician staffing companies, hospitals. There's been lots of reporting about that. As far as medical practices go, that's been a little quieter, but estimates are around $10 billion just in that space.
So, Heather, when I first saw this, I said there's got to be a lot of conflicts of interest here. The private equity companies really looking to maximize returns. Often they do that by really pressuring revenues, cutting costs, that type of thing. But that necessarily isn't in the best interest of patient care. Is this a good idea or not?
A lot of doctors would tell you it's probably not a good marriage. It's not a good fit. For the most part, PE does what they do in other industries, and that can work spectacularly. In medicine, there's something particularly problematic when you're dealing with people's health and lives.
Although when you take a look at some of the investments, it's in very specialized areas that have been highly profitable, including dermatology, with a lot of cosmetically driven types of procedures driving profits. So you could say it's a business like any other. And I'm wondering how they have operated through this period of time as selective or selective surgeries have been prevented as people are prioritized for their COVID symptoms.
Yeah, that's a great question. And these guys are hurting. Revenue is down 20 to 80% at some of these practices. Offices have been shut down. I mean, in some cases, people stay open, but they're deemed non essential by a lot of government officials, and doctors individually are just making decisions not to stay open. And that'll pressure them.
All right. So when I think private equity, I think debt. Are the private equity companies loading these companies up with debt, and now they may face some challenges here given what's going on in the market right now?
Absolutely. They're saddled with pretty big debt loads. A lot of them, will get money from BDCs or other private lenders, and that's going to be trickier to pay off if money's not coming in. So they're going to have to figure out different ways out of this. Some of them are getting money from the CARES Act. But we'll probably see some more of these companies really struggle or go under. I guess on the other hand, there is a big opportunity for private equity and other investors who've been just kind of sitting on the sidelines waiting to invest when there's distress in the market. And you could say doctors will be more financially strained than they've ever been. And that's a buying opportunity. Doctors who turned private equity down 6 months ago are coming back and saying, hey, wait, can we talk about that again?
But that's actually surprising to me, given the fact that we've seen an increasing amount of regulatory pushback, or at least political pushback. I believe Senator Warren has come out and talked about private equity investments, in particular in hospitals that have received money to stay afloat during the pandemic. I know Carlyle had an investment that became somewhat controversial, but I'm trying to figure out how that plays into the calculus of whether private equity is willing to swoop in and try to pick up bargains when the equation may change significantly due to political pressure.
Yeah, I think that's definitely in the backdrop. I mean, a lot of the money coming from health and human services was really intended for healthcare workers directly. So I think that's a little bit different than the payroll protection program and some of the others. But there's a lot of criticism. I think the largest firms take that harder than some folks in the middle market who, don't have the same kind of communication operations and are dealing with investors more than they're dealing with reputation risk, frankly.
So, Heather, have we had any successful, kind of spin outs or sales here by the private equity folks? Are these generating good returns for them? Do we have any evidence on that?
Yeah. Varsity Partners is one of these middle market firms that did an early deal. They made more than 100%. I think there was an Audax Group presentation on the advanced dermatology deal saying that they had quadrupled revenue to $200 million in the time they were in that business. So the early firms say that they're doing really well. It's sort of when the second or third private equity owner comes into the picture, it seems they're squeezing something that's already been made as efficient as it can be at times.
Interesting. Heather Perlberg, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate that fascinating news coming out, column from you, news story. Heather Perlberg, private equity reporter for Bloomberg. Private equity, there's so much cash on the sidelines, Lisa, that, I guess it should not be surprising to see them get into the healthcare space as typically, a pretty solid place for revenue growth.
A couple questions that I have about private equity right now. First comes to that cash pile. I believe it's $1.4 trillion. They talk about the dry powder on the sidelines. And I do wonder when we're going to start to see it deployed, how low valuations have to go before they actually say, okay, we're getting a good deal now. And then the second question that I have emerging from this entire era is whether they emerge as sort of the lost child of the financial system, right? It was the banks the last time around that took the brunt of the heat. Are private equity firms going to be the bad boys this time around? And are people going to point to them and the excessive amounts of leverage that some of their companies have taken on as being a part of the problem? I don't know the answer. I know politically there is a lot of push toward that level, and we're seeing the PPP, for example, was those loans were not allowed to go to certain private equity companies because of this type of pressure. But I wonder what that will mean in terms of regulations, in terms of money flows coming out on the other side of this.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting to see. I think, if you're a private equity, you can certainly say, hey, this is a once in a, literally 100 years issue, a pandemic, government ordered shutdown. Everything was great going into the pandemic. And, it's, a lot of these things are just beyond our control. But clearly, I think we're already starting to see, at least, I think really over the last several weeks, when certainly in the retail space with Neiman Marcus and JCPenney and J. Crew, I mean, the challenged businesses with challenging and levered balance sheets, those are the ones most at risk here. So we'll have to really see how this goes. But a lot of pain likely to come across a number of industries as this economy slowly starts to open back up after what has been a 2.5 month lockdown. That'll be it for us. For Lisa Abramowitz, I'm Paul Sweeney. This is Bloomberg Markets.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. Interconnect here.
Let's start. This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. To stay alert, you must remain at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit your contact with other people. If you have to go out, keep your distance from others, 2 meters apart where possible. Continue to wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Get your daily dose of NFL shop talk with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Start your morning off right with Around the NFL.
Injured, depleted roster into the playoffs, and I didn't think they belonged in the playoffs.
I think overall, though, it was a great divisional round weekend.
fun because you got the first one.
Run into the end zone with the Move the Sticks podcast.
We had a fun little Zoom cocktail hour last night.
Oh, yeah.
What a star-studded affair. Greg, you were there for the earlier part, but it really popped off a little later on. We had Zach Goldman.
And dive deep into the sidelines with the Peter King podcast.
On the occasion of his 50th birthday, come down and record a little bit of retrospective on the life and times of Brett Lorenzo Favre.
That sounds like a bestseller.
It sounds like a precursor to a funeral. That's what it is.
I wasn't thinking that.
Explore these and more hard-hitting NFL podcasts right here on TuneIn. Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs. Didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
round the bases with the Statcast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From New York to our Bloomberg television and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. This is where the world of politics meets the world of business. We're going to start today with the markets and Abigail Doolittle, and we have, it looks like a nice rally going, Abigail, but I guess my question is, do we believe it?
That's probably the question on the minds of many traders and investors out there, because, of course, we've had this move up, down, this week in particular. We had the big rally on Monday. Then yesterday we had a late day sell-off. Now today we have this rally to the upside. One thing that is happening, we are breaking out to the upside of that range we've been talking about. So that is a feather in the cap of the bulls. The fact that it's not coming on any news, though, speaks to the idea that there's just a propensity to buy out there. That FOMO that we've been talking about, markets being supported by stimulus, especially from the Federal Reserve. Important on today's rally, though, David, there is a cyclical tilt to it. We have some of those sectors, those important economic sectors, such as the financials and also the materials up top. So that's bullish. And the fact that you have bonds selling off, that's also bullish. So today we do certainly have those bulls out. One stock that's not participating, though, Royal Caribbean, they put up, as you would expect, a very bad quarter. Interesting, Target put up a very good quarter. Those shares are actually trading lower, though, and that, David, has to do with uncertainty around the consumer. They put up a good quarter. There are some concerns, of course, about margins, and will that eat into the strong sales? But will we see the consumer start to move back toward discretionary spending, or is it going to be all about the staples, David?
Yeah, it's funny. Everybody you talk to, we talked to Brian Moynihan from Bank of America yesterday. That's exactly what he said. It's all about the consumer. At the same time, you're a real student of the markets, Abigail. Tell me how I can tell the difference between a real bull market as opposed to a bear market rally.
Lots of signs around that, David, and that's something that certainly has been on my mind. So right now, it's probably too early to say that this is a real bull market, for the very reason that if you were to go back to the time period of 1929 to 1932, the initial fall back then was a decline of 44%, followed by a 46% rally, and then what ultimately turned into an 87% decline. Let's hope that does not happen. But right now in the S&P 500 off the March 23rd low, we're up about 40% or so. So we have not quite eclipsed that 1929, 1930 rally that, again, then led to pretty dark days. Again, let's not hope that that happens. But what you would want to see to think that that is not going to happen is the sort of sector composition that we do have today: energy, industrials, financials, and materials up top, and not just those stay-at-home stocks. Because if it's the stay-at-home stocks that continue to lead, that may suggest that there's going to be more staying at home and not the reopening that everybody is hoping for, David.
Abigail, thank you so very much. That's Abigail Doolittle reporting on the markets. Well, some already pretty hot rhetoric got even hotter yesterday when President Trump said that the Chinese incompetence had led to what he called was mass worldwide killing. He's referring to the coronavirus, of course. And the question is, what does that really do to U.S.-China relations? And so we welcome now a true China authority. He's George Magnus. He is an associate at the China Center at Oxford University. So, George, thanks so much for being with us. Give us a sense. You followed this over the years. Is just this more of the same, or is there something deeper and darker going on here right now with the way China and the United States are talking to one another?
It's pretty deep and it's pretty dark, David. It's obviously, as I'm sure everybody is aware. I mean, I think the temperature of Sino-U.S. relations has been getting, I don't know whether we should say it's going into the deep freeze or it's actually boiling hot, but I mean, either way, obviously things have been getting progressively worse during the course of this year. If you just cast your mind back, it wasn't that long ago in January that President Trump and President Xi Jinping agreed to a truce in the trade war. Now, that may not have lasted very long under the best of circumstances, but anyway, at that point, we were still in a kind of a frosty, environment, but one in which, basically business was still possible and getting done. But ever since then, really, it's been downhill. And of course, with the presidential election coming up at the end of this year, it's not a one-sided, obviously, deterioration. It's as bad on the Chinese side as it is on the U.S. side. But I think both sides are basically playing pretty tough game at the moment.
And George, what is the situation from President Xi's point of view? We saw those numbers that come out last week indicating that industrial production had come back, oil consumption has come back in China, but maybe not the consumer. Retail sales were disappointing. What does it tell us, if anything, about the resilience of the Chinese consumer in this rebound?
Yeah, it's a good question because actually in some respects, China offers us a little bit of a window on our own world about 6 to 10 weeks down the track because they just happen to be ahead of us in terms of where they are in this evolution of the pandemic. So there's a dichotomy in China between production and demand. So it certainly looks like it's been a lot easier for the Chinese government and the authorities to basically ramp up production, to get electricity production and coal mining and steel production and anything that can produce basically is now running back up at almost where it was or even slightly above where it was before the Chinese New Year in January. But the demand side of the economy, the consumer side, is still pretty disappointing. China is starting to normalize, but it's not normal. And part of the problem is huge unemployment. The officially registered unemployment rate in cities is 6%, which is about 27 million people. But that's widely regarded as being a chronic underestimate, and it certainly excludes about 56 million migrant workers who have not been able to return from their countryside to their jobs in cities. So basically, you should think about Chinese unemployment somewhere between 15-20%, basically. So that's a big drag on the consumer. Wages and salaries have been knocked back, partly as a consequence, partly because of weak demand in the economy. And of course, Chinese consumer behavior is not really what it used to be. So, people are not going to cinemas, restaurants, shops. The footfall is not like it used to be. One imagines that over time these things will sort themselves out if and when we ever have vaccines and as the coronavirus problem becomes more of a nuisance rather than a sort of a daily threat. But for the time being, there is this dichotomy. And of course, if companies are producing a lot of stuff and consumers aren't buying, then you've got an inventory problem which is piling up for sometime in the fall.
Well, and George, as you look at the state of the Chinese economy right now, what does that tell us, if anything, about President Xi's ability to deliver on that trade agreement that you mentioned that we thought we were going to get done in January? President Trump still isn't walking away from that. Does President Xi have the wherewithal to deliver on buying the things to the United States he promised?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to kind of pretty much accept that the terms of that agreement just cannot be fulfilled. I mean, in the first place, there have been reports, I think, I've seen about China sort of increasing its purchases of some U.S. agricultural produce. But basically, if you look at some of the big promises that were made in manufacturing, in agriculture, and in energy, there's just no way that China is going to be able to import this year anything close to the $190 billion worth of additional products that were part of that Phase 1 trade deal. And I don't think it's churlishness on the Chinese side. It's just the economy, obviously, as we know, went through kind of a terrible period during February and March. So fundamental demand in China is weak. It is starting to recover a little bit, but it's, as I said, it's quite slow. And so, Chinese imports, generally speaking, not just from the United States but elsewhere, have been really, really soft. So I don't really know. I mean, at some point, one imagines that the two sides will have to decide what they want to do about the Phase 1 trade deal, either just to basically, call it off or renegotiate it or try something new. But for the moment, I guess it's just not top of anybody's particular agenda.
And George, just to wrap this up briefly, it's not just the economic side, it's also the geopolitical side. We had Secretary Mike Pompeo congratulate the president, as he called her, of Taiwan, and China reacted virulently to it. That is a really sore subject for China. Do you think that was inadvertent on the Secretary of State's part?
I'm tempted to think not, David. I mean, in the today's climate of tit for tat and kind of nationalist, to and fro, I think that any overture. I mean, the White House and the State Department certainly understand well the sensitivity of Taiwan. So from a Chinese point of view, and so if they are going to make, or if they have made overtures or pleasant noises, so to speak, to the president of Taiwan, or certainly they were behind a move to try to bring Taiwan into the to observer status at the World Health Organization recently. I mean, I think they know that this is calculated to cause friction. Much as the Chinese also know how to cause friction for the United States. But I mean, that is, I think, is a sorry state of where we are at the moment, is that the tenor of relations is so low, really, and trust relations have kind of evaporated so much that there is this kind of, mutual teasing that's going on. One imagines and hopes that at some point, the grown-ups will come into the room and try and sort this out.
Yeah, one hopes. George, it's really always a treat to talk to you. That's George Magnus of the China Center at Oxford University. Coming up here, we're going to talk about a presidential threat against the state of Michigan over absentee voting. Rick Davis, our political contributor, will join us to take us through that. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
When keeping...
Fund my car from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on. Choose findandfundmycar.com.
Switch on Acorn TV, the brand new streaming service featuring world-class TV from Britain and beyond. Watch exclusive premieres like the colourful crime drama Queens of Mystery.
Once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
And fan favourites like Inspector George Gently.
I'm just an old copper doing his job.
If you love drama with a little mystery thrown in, enjoy 30 days free with code ACORN30. Then just $4.99 a month. No adverts, no contract, cancel anytime. Join online today at acorn.tv.
The garden tools that mean you can grow your own. The fire pit that turns tea time into an alfresco dining experience. The paddling pool that turns your back garden into a water park. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided. Subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited. 18 plus.
Did you know that players of People's Postcode Lottery have raised over £500 million for charities and good causes? They've also won £63 million in prizes so far this year, and it could be your postcode next. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 21st of May to play in the June draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
At Asda, we're helping you shop safely by keeping our stores clean and limiting customer numbers so you can keep 2 meters apart. With our Scan and Go mobile app, you can reduce contact at the till too. And most stores are now open from 8 a.m. until 10 p.m. Asda, we're all in this together. Subject to availability. Mobile data charges may apply.
We're all having to get used to the new normal. And at Birkbeck University, we're experts at being adaptable. As London's evening university, we've been flexing around the lives of busy commuters for nearly 200 years. And you can find everything you need to secure your place for autumn online. From expert advice to virtual tours, a live chat with our students and course applications. Make the new normal, studying for the career that you really want. Search Birkbeck, and it's new problem solved.
At HMRC, we're working hard to fight tax scams during the coronavirus pandemic. Here's how you can also protect yourself. Be alert. Think before parting with your information or money. Be calm. It's okay to refuse requests. If you feel rushed, it could be a scam. Be secure. Tell HMRC and your bank if you think you've been a victim. Remember, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. For more information, search scams on gov.uk.
Typical Danny. Imagine trying to unwind at a spa weekend and you wind up getting your mud pack all over your fave personalised dressing gown. But no worries. Just one wash and my clothes will smell perf with Surf. Surf gives you long-lasting fragrance with natural essential oils. Find your fragrance in Surf's laundry range.
TSB believe in people helping people. So if for whatever reason you become an innocent victim of fraud, they will refund every penny you lost from your TSB account. Find out more about their fraud refund guarantee at tsb.co.uk. Terms and conditions apply.
Max is dreaming of riding a giant chameleon whilst fighting a clan of ninjas. But in reality, he's helping fight COVID-19 in his sleep. Like thousands of others, he's joined the Dream Team. By using the Dream Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments.
I'll fight you.
You go, Max. Search Vodafone Dream Lab and join the Dream Team tonight.
DreamLab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
I've used my ample time indoors to hunt down my odd socks. I found one down the sofa, one in the bread bin, and one in a serious relationship with my cat. But there are better ways to spend your time. That's why Money Supermarket is helping you find cheaper insurance, better interest rates, and easier ways to manage your bills. You can find many more small steps towards money car at Money Supermarket.
Because we have Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, saying she wants to put into law that we're going to vote by, everybody's going to vote by mail come November, and the president really will have none of it.
Yeah, this battle's been brewing for some time. You saw it rise up during the debate over the CARES Act. Congress put in $400 million of election support, knowing that in some states they wouldn't have restrictions lifted in time for the elections, and so they were finding ways of supporting that. And so I think the president picking a fight with a a statewide Secretary of State who controls the election process in Michigan is pretty unusual, right? I mean, you typically try to pick your fights carefully if you're the President of the United States, but he tweeted out a pretty strong attack. That was both a personal political attack, but also inconsistent with what she's really doing. I mean, what they allow you to have absentee ballots in Michigan, but what Jocelyn Benson was doing was saying, we're going to allow you to apply for them. And so she's sending out an application for those ballots. And so maybe Trump wasn't well informed. Maybe he just wants to pick this fight. But you see this happening in Michigan, in Nevada, a similar thing with the president. There's an effort in Texas to limit the ability to vote by mail in the courts by Republicans. So this is going to be preliminary to the general election in November.
Rick, as far as you can tell, do you think this is because the president really thinks this appeals to his base, that people, for example, in the state of Michigan, which he needs desperately in this next election, will side with him on this issue? Or is it really a question of who's going to end up voting?
Well, there's always been a stream of Republicans, usually very conservative Republicans, who don't trust the government. And so they show up on Election Day. They're not the ones in states that do have early voting or absentee voting who participate. They never want to turn their ballot over to the Postal Service. And so there is a strain within the Republican Party who just don't trust government apparatus. And, of course, we know Donald Trump appeals to those voters. There's also been a storyline, and it's pretty much just a storyline, not supported by fact, that you empower more voters who are Democratic voters if you allow vote by mail than otherwise. All the states that have vote by mail have been a good test case for that, and there's no real clear indication that that's the case. So it may be that he's acting to rile up that right-wing base of his. It may be that he actually does fear that it allows broader participation and potentially more Democratic votes. And in states like Michigan and Nevada, those are going to be hard-fought states. They'll be targeted states in the general election, and he probably cares about trying to control the ballots as much as he can.
Rick, finally, give us some sense of where the race is overall, and very specifically on the question of Joe Biden and his pick of a vice presidential candidate. A lot of talk about that right now. You have some experience with picking a candidate that gets a lot of attention. Is there somebody out there that Joe Biden could pick that could really goose his campaign?
Sure. I mean, as you and I've spoken in the past, when you pick a vice president, if you're ahead in the polls, you usually pick one that can help you govern. And if you're behind in the polls, you want to pick one that can help you win. And I think Biden has sort of the dual problem where even though he's ahead in the national polls and ahead in almost every targeted state, he's not ahead enough to have the confidence that he can pick just someone who can govern and doesn't need to add anything to the ballot. And so I suspect that the Biden campaign will be clearly trying to find somebody who can help them win in those targeted states. We know that the battleground on those states will be fought in the suburbs over women's votes. And so he's already declared that he's going to pick a woman, and now the question is which woman is going to matter the most. Typically, campaigns have already started that process of diligence where they get a list of a dozen or so candidates and they start testing them with polling in states with the key constituencies and see who does well. That usually then results in a shorter ballot of candidates. And so if they can narrow down a larger list to, just a half a dozen or less over the course of the next couple months, that'll be their primary objective. And that is a more scientific approach to the culling process. And then a lot of it will be who's the best able to govern, who's got the best chemistry with the candidate, who's got the best ability to contrast with Trump and the current administration. And they'll get to all that over the course of this summer.
Rick, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much. That's Rick Davis. He is from Stone Court Capital. Coming up here, we're going to talk about the airlines. There may be some green shoots. That's going to cover our stock of the hour coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com.
Tom has been a teacher for over 40 years. One day, I think one of the students had asked the question and he didn't remember the answer. And I also noticed that he was letting his class out earlier than they were supposed to let out. I was really starting to worry.
Levi and I talked about how it would change our lives, but he was there beside me.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
You've always relied on Bloomberg's strong Asian presence.
You didn't mention any particular areas in China. Let me just go to Hong Kong.
And now you need it even more.
Where are we in terms of understanding President Xi?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
We're starting to see infections in some of the Asian countries.
Tonight at 6 Eastern.
Do you ever get the feeling some people just weren't prepared?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
We think in June there's going to be more demand for flying from May. We're seeing that in some of our forward bookings. Again, we're very cautious, but we expect to fly our June schedule probably between 70 to 75% of what we'd normally fly, whereas in May we were flying 85 to 90% down on what we would normally fly.
That was JetBlue CEO Robin Hayes speaking earlier today to Bloomberg Television. We're going to stick with airlines now because just like JetBlue, other airlines are seeing at least some hope, including Delta, which is our stock of the hour, and we turn to Abigail Doolittle.
Well, David, there are certainly signs that people are taking to the skies again. Maybe not the way that we used to fly, but certainly well off the bottoms in April, similar to what CEO of JetBlue, Robin Hayes, was just saying, and that those trends are going to continue. So Delta really adding on to that sentiment on the day earlier with an interview with one of our competitors, quite frankly. But you can see that these airlines are doing extremely well over the last couple of weeks. On some weeks, gaining more than 20%. So again, that optimism that people are going to take to the sky, both business and leisure. And also, we do, of course, have that bailout, which is helping these airlines to some degree, or to even a big degree, saving the industry. American receiving the most pledged money, $5.8 billion. Delta, $5.3 billion. JetBlue, funny enough, the smallest amount of that money, just about $1 billion. But relative to Delta, they are saying that they are increasing flights for June by 200. That's up from 100 just 2 days ago. And they're also saying that passengers are up 150% from April levels. July could be much better. So again, just the overall sense that people will be back in the skies soon, David.
Exactly. And Abigail, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. Will the consumer come back, whether it's to retail or whether it's to the airlines? And we don't know. They've got a long way yet to come. They're still well off where they were, but there's some indication they're starting to come back already in May and into June.
There are these signs that folks are going back out into the world. And I have read that there are two ways that pandemics end historically. One, if there's a vaccine. Two, if people simply become less fearful. They might still be careful, but they're less fearful. So if that happens, you could see folks take back to the air and travel. One area, though, of the airline industry overall, though, that's still being hit are the airline makers, of course, David. Because that demand is weak, they are having to preserve cash. They're not making planes. Let's see whether or not that changes. Both Boeing and Airbus down 60% this year. Really pretty incredible. But those green shoots we are starting to see for the airline industry overall, David.
Okay, Abigail, thank you so very much. That's Abigail Doolittle. Coming up here next, the plight of the cities in this pandemic. We're going to talk with the head of the National League of Cities. He is Clarence Anthony. That's on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute.
U.S. stocks are posting gains. Investors are optimistic on signs the economy will continue to reopen. The Dow is up 402 points, S&P up 54, NASDAQ up 198 points or 2%. Shares of Facebook and Amazon are on the rise to records today. Amazon is releasing its first big budget video game today called Crucible. And homebound do-it-yourselfers were turning to Lowe's over the past couple of months. The home improvement chain posted stronger than expected quarterly earnings. Lowe's reported store sales rose 12% from last year, while digital sales jumped 80%. Meanwhile, Target sales broke records last quarter online and off. Target.com orders in April alone were like Cyber Monday every day. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Debbie Hart is president of BioNJ, which represents the interests of more than 400 New Jersey-based biotech companies. She's also a strong voice in the biotech sector, supporting research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology. She sees NJIT as a valuable partner in attracting venture capital and biotech startups to the Garden State.
So the number one reason that companies come here to New Jersey for the biotech industry is for our talent. We estimate that there were about 30 biotech companies in the early 90s in New Jersey, about 80 in 1998. Today there are more than 400. And that growth continues, and it's come from every possible angle. Other countries, other states, they've spun out of our academic institutions as well as our biotech and our pharma companies, and we expect that growth to continue long into the future. And NJIT is a pipeline for talent, for companies, for entrepreneurs to do that important work.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Market upheavals.
The narrative is driven by uncertainty about the virus.
Political reversals.
It's not clear that some of the Republicans up on the Hill are agreed with the Republican White House.
Economic shifts.
The macro clearly being driven by the coronavirus outbreak.
Everything seems to be in motion.
Will it also mean a global recession in your view now?
But here, you're on solid ground.
Looking forward to guiding you through all of this.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. For Bloomberg First Word News, we go now to Mark Crumpton.
David, thank you. President Trump is threatening to withhold funding for Michigan, a crucial 2020 swing state, and Nevada unless their leaders refrain from facilitating absentee voting. The president's tweets come as many states are considering expanding access to remote voting this year. Dozens of voters and poll workers were infected with COVID-19 after Republicans in Wisconsin refused to expand absentee voting for that state's April 7th primary. India will allow airlines to resume domestic flights next week as Prime Minister Narendra Modi tries to gradually restart economic activity, while coronavirus infections in the nation are climbing at the fastest pace in Asia. India has more than 106,000 confirmed cases. More than 3,300 people have died. An Israeli court has ordered Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to appear for the opening of his criminal trial in Jerusalem on Sunday. The Prime Minister's attorneys had asked the court for an exemption. Mr. Netanyahu was indicted on charges of fraud, breach of trust, and accepting bribes last year. He has denied any wrongdoing. His trial was supposed to begin last month, but was delayed due to the coronavirus pandemic. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David?
Thanks so much, Mark. The debate continues on Capitol Hill about whether to give aid to state and local governments or how much aid to give. But in the meantime, cities are really losing revenue every single day, particularly because of the unemployment situation. There's a study now out from the National League of Cities estimating that over the next 3 years, the cities across the country will lose $360 billion from that source alone. We welcome now the CEO of NLC. He is Clarence Anthony. So welcome so much for joining us. I appreciate you being here. So give us a sense of what this survey really showed. That's a lot of money, $360 billion.
Yeah, David, thank you so much for having me on the air with you today to talk about this most important issue. What our research shows is that over the next 3 years, cities, towns, and villages all over America will expect a $360 billion revenue shortfall. And as we look at this year, what we are anticipating is $134 billion. So this is based upon the information that we're getting from our members and a survey that we got. And again, we go to 2020, we're looking at $117 billion, and then 2022, $110 billion. You know, these may sound like numbers, but this is really about, America getting back to normal, if whatever that is. It's about basic services. We know that we're going to have fewer police officers to respond to residents' 911 call, fewer EMS, fewer sanitation workers. So this is not just about the numbers. It's about the people that live in these cities, towns, and villages that we represent.
So, Mr. Anthony, could it be even worse? $360 billion is bad enough, goodness knows, but could it be even worse? Because this is just because of unemployment, as I understand it. There's a lot of pressure being put on the states as well. Might the states have to cut back on some of the assistance they give to cities and villages?
Yeah, these are estimates, and I think as we go further into 2020 and 2021, we anticipate that we'll get more updated numbers. But what we're seeing in states like Kentucky is approximately a 35% unemployment rate. We're estimating in Georgia a 36%. Louisiana, again, those numbers are up to 28%. So we're seeing right now the impact on the shutdown in most cities to be having a significant impact on the businesses, lack of jobs, lack of ability to provide the services that we need. And what we've been saying to Congress and the administration is, if you really want America to start back up, you need to jumpstart the economy of the cities, towns, and villages in America. And that is so important because we're seeing cities like San Antonio furloughing employees. We're seeing Charleston, West Virginia, who's showing in their budget $98.9 million budget. They're seeing a $2 million deficit thus far. So this is just the start of what we anticipate will be a long recovery for America.
And Clarence, is it distributed evenly across the country, or are some parts hit worse than others?
Yeah, I think all states are being hit in a different way. But what we're seeing is that the small and rural communities, it's starting to impact those communities now. It's the 1-2 punch. First, we're seeing the increase in the COVID pandemic numbers in those rural communities. And then we're seeing the increase in loss of jobs. It's like a 1-2 punch. These communities are not as diverse as the larger communities in America, the most big city. And when we talk about COVID, we have that picture. But we have stories in those communities that are showing us in Nebraska, Oklahoma, in other parts of our nation, and even Ohio, that these numbers are growing. and thus the impact is more significant. They're not having the ability to be able to have the access to the health care, the testing, the transportation to be able to get to the hospital and other services. So it is impacting at this point the most vulnerable populations in our nation. And we just want to make sure that our city leaders have the tools to be able to help in this recovery mode that we are in.
Does this affect the attitude of mayors across the country toward reopening the economy? Because when you listen to President Trump at the White House, we heard Secretary of Treasury Mnuchin yesterday up on the Hill saying the main thing we need to do to get the unemployment down, to get the economy going again, is to open the economy back up. Does this lead many mayors to say, you know what, we really want to lift restrictions?
I think that what we're hearing from our mayors that are members of the National League of Cities is that they want to follow the direction of the healthcare professionals and the scientists, and what is good for one community in Colorado may not be the same thing for Georgia, based upon the data that they are receiving. And we've been hearing that over and over again. The most important thing to our leaders is that they have a healthy citizenry, and that we got to take our time, because we don't want to find ourselves going, backwards in terms of this process.
Okay, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being with us to give us that result of your study. That is Clarence Anthony. He is the CEO of the National League of Cities. Coming here next, bikes may be getting short supply. We're going to talk with the CEO of Trek Bicycle. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
This probably wasn't what you...
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
This is a message from the government. There is new guidance to help businesses and employees who cannot work from home be COVID-19 secure at work. The advice will help you conduct a risk assessment, put social distancing measures in place, improve hygiene and cleaning in the workplace, and look after the well-being of your employees. Every workplace is different. Use the guidance to make your business COVID-19 secure. Access the support you need at gov.uk/working-safely. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
TSB believe in people helping people. That's why they've created TSB Smart Agent, a new secure way for TSB to answer your personal and business banking questions online. Find out more at tsb.co.uk. Automated service available 24/7. TSB partners available 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday to Friday.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
The force is strong in my family. My father has it. I have it. You have that power too.
For the first time ever, stream the complete Skywalker saga, all in one place. 9 incredible films, one epic story, only on Disney+.
The force will be with you. Always.
The Skywalker Saga on Disney+. Now streaming. 18+ subscription required. T's and C's apply.
I've used my ample time indoors to hunt down my odd socks.
I found one down the sofa, one in the bread bin, and one in a serious relationship with my cat. But there are better ways to spend your time. That's why Money Supermarket is helping you find cheaper insurance, better interest rates, and easier ways to manage your bills. You can find many more small steps towards money car at Money Supermarket.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying to
standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Get your MLB fix with these great podcasts on TuneIn. Fill your seventh inning stretch with the Ringer MLB Show.
I just can't get over it. It's like, oh, well, Jeter Downs didn't realize he was a top. Like, my dad is drinking the Kool-Aid on this. He's like, of course. Mookie was going to leave. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't know that.
Slide into second with the Starting Nine podcast.
Nolan Arenado slides right into the top spot for favorite baseball player. Active in the league right now. It is a pleasure to be sitting next to you, sir.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
This is we've been waiting a long time for this. We actually, in terms of like active
Round the Bases with the StatCast podcast.
Ways of going about it. I picked third, so in some ways it made it easier for me. Mike, just to go over the first couple of picks. Mike took Barry Bonds, who I think was kind of the obvious guy to take number one. Not only
catch these and more MLB podcasts right here on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Spend a lot of time trying to get reelected, and they spend little time putting a plan in place to move the country forward.
Well, as you say, the book actually has a 16-point plan. There are 16 points in the plan, actually, that I've looked through, which is a lot. It's very detailed. As I understand it, originally you were thinking about running for president yourself. Why didn't you do that?
I was really disappointed. I've always loved the country, and I love the history of our country, and I was really disappointed with the performance of the government back in 2011. And I went to my son's graduation, and the great American historian David McCullough was the speaker, and at the end he looked at the graduates and he said, "Do something for your country." And I thought to myself, what could I do? And so I wrote a book called 12 Simple Solutions to Save America. And I wrote it back in 2016, and I did not save America. And I said to myself after the 2016 election, I said, if somebody competent doesn't run with a plan, that I'll just do it myself. And so I spent the last couple of years writing my plan as if I was going to run. And I seriously considered running, and at the end, I decided not to run because there were a couple people who had run presidential campaigns, and they told me I had very little chance. And I thought what I really wanted to do was educate the American people. So I decided to take the exact plan that I was going to use if I was going to run, and I put it into a book. And I really want to educate the American people, and so I put that book out. You can go to Presidential Playbook, download it for free, because I just want to educate Americans, or you can get it at Amazon.
Yeah, actually, I've done that. I've downloaded and looked through the PDF, and it is fascinating. It covers a lot of issues that we talk about often in the United States that not much gets done about. But I wonder, Mr. Burke, whether there's a real difference between running a company on the one hand and running a country on the other, because there's something called politics, and there's something called Congress when you get there, because some of the proposals you had, like a line item veto for the president, that's been around forever. A lot of people think that'd be a good idea, but boy, they haven't been able to get it done. Term limits on congressmen, a lot of talk about that, really hard to get that done. Actually being able to hire and fire federal employees, doing away with the employees' unions, paying them more money, sounds like a good idea for a company. Is there a difficulty of a businessman going to Washington because they don't know how to really pull the levers and push the buttons there?
Yeah, I think one of the things, I think that's a really good question. I think it all starts with the campaign. I think as Americans, we're treated to these campaigns where people spend billions of dollars dumbing down the American public because none of these issues are ever discussed. And that's what would have made my campaign different, is I would have talked all about my plan. I wouldn't have talked about negative advertising. I would have focused on the plan. And I don't think that the vast majority of American people have any knowledge as to these critical issues that are facing us. And I think one of the things that we're learning, especially through COVID-19, is good government matters. And I think having a plan matters. And I think if you want to take these issues on, and I have 16 of them, but if you want to take on climate control, if you want to take on high-performance government, if you want to have a better foreign policy, if you want to rebuild America through a better transportation system, I really believe it can happen. But I think you've got to go out there and you got to talk to the American public like they're adults. You got to talk about what the real issues are, and you got to ask for the order. And I don't think anybody ever does that. I think it's turned into reality TV for campaigns, and then all of a sudden when somebody's elected, they're like, what's next? And in my situation, I wrote a book, and in that book, it's a complete plan. I think what we need from a president is, especially at this time, is I think we need an activist. And I lay that out in the book, just some really great ideas on things we can do to turn this country around.
Okay, Mr. Burke, I really appreciate you being here. That is John Burke. He's the president of Trek Bicycle. That's a name we all know. He's also the author of the Presidential Playbook 2020 that we've been talking about. Thanks for being with us, Mr. Burke. In the meantime, we have some news crossing the Bloomberg right now. Chancellor Angela Merkel has said that the Lufthansa bailout deal is now close. So it looks like Germany may be bailing out Lufthansa. It's what it used to be, its national airline. Coming up on Balance of Power, we're going to talk about the 20-year auction for Treasury bonds coming up with Mike McKee, our policy and economics correspondent. That's going up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
In these times of loss and crisis, the people you trust to ask the questions you need answered become even more vital.
Should the president, though, impose the Defense Production Act?
Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Help us understand what we know so far.
Bloomberg Business Week.
They are on the front line of the impact of the coronavirus.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative. And that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Raines, and her husband Robert Friedman, Jewish activists and philanthropists, talk about why they chose the Jewish Communal Fund for their charitable giving.
As very busy working parents, we wanted to focus more on the charity part of it and wanted to focus more on our children and less on the administration.
The Jewish Communal Fund is one of the oldest and largest donor-advised funds, but at the same time, they're totally up-to-date and have state-of-the-art systems for us to access and manage our contributions online. The assets in our fund at the JCF grow tax-free, so we can generate more charitable dollars to support the charities that we care about most.
Let JCF minimize your taxes and maximize your charitable giving.
We're incredibly passionate about our charity, and the JCF allows us to focus more on the charity and less on the administration and the headaches.
For more information about Jewish Communal Fund, visit our website at jcfny.org and request a new fund kit.
Welcome back to Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Just a few minutes from now, the U.S. Treasury is going to do something it has not done in 34 years. It's going to issue some bonds that mature in 20 years. To take us through the significance of this, welcome on Michael McKee. He is, of course, our Chief Economics and Policy Correspondent. So, Mike, why is this such a big deal?
Well, in part, David, because there's nothing else going on today, so the bond market has this to focus on. But again, it hasn't auctioned, rather, since 1986. So there's a sort of uniqueness to that as well. The question is whether this is going to be well received, especially given the fact that the Treasury is issuing so many bonds over the next couple of years to pay for the deficit. Do people want them in the 20-year tenor? A lot of people say that maybe they do, because the 30-year bond, remember, was interrupted from 2001 to 2006. So there aren't really a lot of off-the-run 30s in the 20-year space right now that would have climbed down from the original 30-year issuance. And so if you're looking for that kind of duration, particularly if you're a retirement fund manager and you need a 20-year duration, you probably would be happy to have this. The question is, do enough other people want it to make it a deep and liquid market and for the Treasury to keep issuing it? The Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin, said they'd like to keep issuing not only 20s, but much more at the long end, because obviously with interest rates so low and the deficit so high, they've got to pay a lot in interest costs if rates go up.
So, Mike, it may, as you explained it may help the trading of these bonds a little bit, smooth it out a bit. At the same time, address the bigger issue about that demand for U.S. Treasuries, period, because there's just, I think it's what is it, $3 trillion this quarter, something like that they're going to have to issue. It's really extraordinary, and yet there seems to be no indication people are getting cold feet.
Yeah, it's very strange. By the book, you should expect yields to rise at this point, because we're looking at so much issuance and you'd have to pay people to take them. But no, at this point, the rest of the world wants U.S. Treasuries, and so do many Americans. Now, that may be in part because everybody's thinking they've got to save so much, but you'd expect more on that at the shorter end. You'd also expect portfolio managers to be taking up 30s because we got a lot of people retiring. But it is an anomaly, and a lot of people think that at some point we're going to pay a price in higher yields. We just don't know where that is. So you get all these people saying, well, MMT is right. Nobody knows if MMT is right either. It's just that right now we got enough buyers.
So a little over an hour from now, we're going to get the minutes from the FOMC meeting that were about 3 weeks old. But you've got something much more current, because you're going to get to talk with Robert Kaplan, the Dallas Fed president, coming up at just about 20 minutes from right now here on Bloomberg. So give us a sense of what you really want to hear from Robert Kaplan.
Well, we want to know how the economy is faring in various districts around the country as they get ready to reopen. This is going to be a story of a lot of different states, a lot of different cities, and how they proceed through reopening and how anxious people are to get back out and spend money and resume economic activity. Will companies reopen? Will restaurants reopen? Those are the interesting questions, and I'll be interested to see what Rob has to say about the Dallas district. Yesterday, we talked with Eric Rosengren from Boston, and he said he thinks that they may be going a little quickly, even though the Boston district is one of the slowest moving at this point. He's worried this is going to be a very long, slow recovery. You can take a listen here.
I think they're very much hoping that there'll be a pickup in the second half of the year. I think in GDP terms, there will be a pickup. I also think, though, that unfortunately the labor markets are still going to be pretty weak. So in a talk I gave today, I highlighted that by the end of the year, I expect the unemployment rate to still be in double digits. So it's probably going to be significantly down from where we are right now.
So that was the view from Boston. We'll see if the view from Texas is the same. Jay Powell sort of said the same thing yesterday, David, that Eric Rosengren said.
One last question. Negative rates. BOE is interested. Apparently the Fed is not.
The Fed is not, and they've made that pretty clear. And you've noticed that the markets has now priced out negative rates. Maybe they're starting to believe the Fed when they say something.
How about that? Okay. Thanks so much to Michael McKee. It's always great to have Mike with us. And once again, you want to stay tuned for about 20 minutes from right now at 1:15 Eastern Time. He's going to be talking with Dallas Fed President Rob Kaplan. Also in the second hour of Balance of Power, I get to talk to Tom Halverson. He's the CoBank CEO about what's going on with farmers. That does it for the television portion of Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston, and this is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. If there's one thing nobody probably predicted about the coronavirus pandemic, it's the roaring return of drive-in entertainment. From drive-through strip clubs in Portland, Oregon, to drive-in church services in Seoul, that's quite a contrast. Even concerts are now the hottest ticket in town. Industry leader Live Nation Entertainment, who has seen its billion-dollar business precipitously fall, thinks of drive-in concerts like a smaller, more intimate venue at more premium prices, minus the profit from any alcohol sales. What happens once the novelty wears off remains to be seen. But for now, even the first big social event of the Hamptons season will be a drive-in movie night, and while not the first, it's likely to be one of the more exotic. Think classic convertibles and Escalades, steps from the roar of the Atlantic and billionaires' estates. Advance tickets are $50 a car, with proceeds going to charity. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
There are times when you have to go it alone, but these should not be those times.
Would the medical crisis in any other central bank execute?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Jonathan Ferro.
Walk me through the dynamics that are going to shape the euro in the coming months.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern.
Do we have the ability to coordinate with this virus?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
When things move this quick, do things break?
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg World Headquarters. I'm Charlie Pellet. U.S. stocks now at a 10-week high as investors focus on signs the U.S. economy will continue to reopen, and key retail earnings show signs of resiliency. Crude oil adding to its 4-day rally. Let's begin with crude. West Texas Intermediate back with a 33 handle, up 3.4%, 33.04 on WTI. Brent crude 35.49, up by 2.4%. Gold is up 0.1%, 17.47 the ounce, higher by $2.20 right now. The 10-year down 3/32 with a yield of 0.69%. S&P up 48 at 29.71, a gain of 1.6%. The Dow up 352 points, up 1.5%. Nasdaq is up 170 points for Nasdaq. That is a gain of 1.9%. After earnings, Target shares, they are lower now by 2.6%. Low shares, they are higher, little changed, up 7 cents on Lowe's, now at 116.93. So it is an update for the U.S. equity market, but what about commodities? Let's check in with Bloomberg's Renita Young.
Optimism over a coronavirus vaccine is starting to fade, boosting demand for havens like gold. Late Tuesday, reports questioned Moderna's coronavirus vaccine, adding to concerns. And oil investors are weighing signs the market is rebalancing against what's still an uncertain economic outlook. The report questioning Moderna's coronavirus vaccine added more caution to the oil market. Renita Young, Bloomberg Radio.
And Renita mentioned Moderna. Its shares are up today after yesterday's 10% drop. Moderna shares up now by 0.3%. McDonald's is estimating that tens of millions of dollars will be needed to help its U.S. franchisees, but it's also warning that some distressed franchisees may need to downsize or sell off locations. McDonald's shares up by 2.5%. 102 on Wall Street. Time now for the Market Drivers Report with a focus on American depository receipts. Here he is working from home on a Wednesday, Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are rising along with U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is up 1.7%, and the S&P 500 is up 1.6%. Deutsche Bank has gained 6.2% in U.S. trading. Supervisory Board Chairman Paul Achleitner said he plans to step down when his contract expires in 2022. He's overseen multiple turnaround efforts at the bank since taking the position in 2012. Germany's Lufthansa has risen 4%. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said a deal to rescue the airline is almost done. Lufthansa is seeking about $10 billion in financial aid and told employees that the need for support is becoming more urgent. Another German company, Fresenius Medical Care, has climbed 3.5%. The kidney dialysis provider was raised the equivalent of buy from Holden Morgan Stanley. The firm also upgraded the company's controlling shareholder, Fresenius, and those ADRs are up 9.4%. China's Luckin Coffee has tumbled 35.5% as trading resumed. Buying and selling of the ADRs had been halted last month after the coffee shop chain disclosed an accounting fraud. NASDAQ plans to delist the company, Charlie.
All right, we thank you very much, Dave Wilson, keeping track of those American depository receipts. Again, recapping, equities higher with the S&P up 48 points right now. That is a gain of 1.7%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
Everybody in the world has one common enemy, and that's to win the war against this virus.
The first thing you do is listen to the medical professionals.
Those people that lost their pay, we want to see that pay continued.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
Our priority is the health and well-being and the lives of the American people.
We want to make sure that we are continuing to support our hospitals.
We've unleashed our most potent weapon of all, the courage of the American people.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Fed minutes are released in just over an hour from right now, and 20-year Treasury bonds go on sale. President Trump pledges more help for troubled farmers, and Secretary Mnuchin urges we get back to business, even as experts warn that we may not have laid the foundation we need yet. From New York, welcome to the second hour of Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. In testifying to the Senate Banking Committee yesterday, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin echoed his boss, President Trump, in saying what the economy really needs is for states to open their economies back up. But some experts warn that we haven't done the work necessary to make sure that opening up doesn't do more harm than good. We welcome now Dr. Erwin Redlener. He is director of the National Center for Disaster Preparedness at Columbia's Earth Institute. So, Doctor, thank you so much for being here. You have a report out. It's a comprehensive, clear, concise report, but it gives one pause whether we really are ready to open up. Give us what the problems are.
Sure. Hi, David. So, the problems are very, very basic. You know, we originally needed testing because we wanted to know how prevalent the COVID-19 was in the United States and allow the modelers to develop the projections and so on. And, of course, secondly, we also needed it for the healthcare system to be able to make accurate diagnoses of people. But the plans to reopen, and many states have already begun the reopening process, reopening local businesses have given us a third highly compelling reason to be doing testing, but for entirely different set of rationales. And this has to do with this fact. If you're reopening businesses in your community, your county, your state, you really want to know now, because we're talking about consumers, citizens walking into places that they used to go into freely and often, and sitting down in a barbershop chair or a nail salon or taking your family to the restaurant, you really, really want to know if the barber, the nail salon person, the kitchen staff, and the servers in the restaurant, are they or are they not positive for this coronavirus? And I think that is the limiting factor, and this is what's in the report, to really fully reopening. And if we do reopen in the absence of that kind of local, very rapid, what's called point of service or point of contact, if we don't know that this morning your barber was negative, I don't see how you could trust sitting in that barber chair, 10 inches away from the guy who's cutting your hair. So this is a very, very practical, citizen-oriented situation. It's not about public health epidemiology, let's say. It is about whether it's safe to go into these establishments for people. And by the way, they need to know whether the employees need to know whether you, the customer, are positive. So our belief is that we're really, really rushing the process by opening the businesses without having the ability to test rapidly on site at those consumer facilities.
So in what you just said, there were two things that just jump out at me: test rapidly and on site. That is, they don't have to take you to a lab or something. Why don't do we have that capability? And if not, why don't we?
Well, we have it in a very premature form. Rutgers University a few weeks ago announced a test that could be done rapidly on site using saliva. You don't even have to do a swab. The technology exists, but it's in very early form. The FDA has been testing close to 400 different kinds of tests. Many that have been released without full exploration by the FDA as to whether they're effective and accurate and all that. And why don't we, David? And that's really the key question. We've known about this since January. And for the U.S. not to have that capacity and capability right now is not okay. And there's going to be a lot of postmortems about what went wrong with the development of tests and distribution of tests in the U.S. at some point. But for right now, it's unanswerable why we don't. But the question is, what are we going to do about it? We cannot keep the economy in this state forever. And the sooner we can get stores back open and consumers in those stores, the better, obviously. We all know that. But it's simply a binary question. We're going to do it safely or we're going to do it with risk.
Is the FDA hurting or helping? I've talked to at least one expert who thinks that the FDA is part of the logjam here on the testing front.
It might be. It's very hard to say. There's a lot of details that it's just impossible to know. I mean, the CDC, first of all, really sort of fell down on the job in getting appropriate testing, even regular laboratory testing out to the states back in March, and this has been sort of a disaster for quite a long time. There's going to be a lot of fingers pointed and a lot of analyses done, but it's hard to say. The FDA is overwhelmed with stuff, but I think they could be doing a better job also. And by the way, some of the tests that they allowed out there, like the Abbott tests, have only a 50% accuracy, some people think, which is basically a toss of the coin. So we have many problems. But again, can we open the restaurants and the barbershops, et cetera, and the gyms without knowing whether the employees are actually not carriers?
And there's the epidemiological question. There's the public health question. There's also the human nature question, because at some point people are going to start resisting compliance.
Well, there's so many. Yes, of course they're going to resist compliance. They already are resisting compliance. And spoke a couple of weeks ago with the mayors of Atlanta and Augusta, Georgia, which of course was the first state to reopen. Both those mayors were mortified. The mayor of Atlanta said she was walking around the streets. That happened on April 27th, and the next couple of days she's walking around the streets of Atlanta with hardly anybody wearing masks, everybody clumped together. I mean, yes, we're going to have some real big problems convincing the public that they need to sustain the public health protection policies and recommendations. Very difficult. And by the way, even when we get a vaccine, which is really going to be the best hope, there's a huge anti-vax movement worldwide now. Yeah. And we're not even sure who's actually going to take the vaccine even once we have it. So This problem's going to be with us, David, for a long time.
Well, as I say, this is a report worth looking at. I've already passed it along to a few other people about exactly what we need to do to protect ourselves as we open back up. That comes from Dr. Erwin Redliner from Columbia. Thank you for being with us, Doctor. We are waiting right now for a very special interview with Rob Kaplan done by our colleague Michael McKee. In the meantime, let's check in on the markets, and Kriti Gupta, who we love to talk to, she's Bloomberg Live cross-asset reporter, is here to take us through it. So, Kriti, it looks like a rally, but is it or not? I mean, I don't know if I trust it.
Well, there definitely are some mixed emotions here, David. A lot of this is just coming on from the immense sell-off we saw yesterday in the last hour of trading. So a lot of the traders I'm talking to are just saying, well, yesterday's sell-off off that report that potentially Moderna's vaccine may not have enough data to really call it a success. We kind of already knew that on Monday, which drove Monday's rally. You're seeing a lot of this buying just really coming off the idea of buying the dip. But if you really look into what the major averages are really doing, it's a lot of buying and selling on technical levels. So you are seeing some arbitrage here. Like I said, buying at low levels, selling at, the not so low levels.
Is it broad-based?
It seems to be. What's interesting here is what the sectors are doing. It's actually led by energy stocks right now. Energy stocks higher by 3.2%, of course, coming in tandem with that oil rally. What you want to keep in mind, though, is that oil is in the $30 handle. So WTI trading at $32 a barrel right now. Brent's at $35. What you want to keep in mind is as it gets closer to that $40 level, that's a key level for a lot of energy companies to start ramping up production, potentially even opening up some of their access to credit markets as well. So that's something you want to keep in mind. That's also why you're seeing some of that rally feed into energy today, which is in turn feeding into the broader rally.
So I understand there's such a thing as a bear market rally, right? So how do we know that this is not a bear market rally? Because we had this actually going all the way back to 1929 to 32. The market came back before it went back down.
That's right. Well, I mean, that is the question of the day. It's really hard when you're in the moment to call it a bear market rally or not. It's usually done retroactively. What's important to note here is when you're talking about a bear market rally is really to look at the fundamentals. And right now, the case driving this rally seems to be that this reopening is going to continue. Now, the one caveat I see just from talking to traders, but also from listening to a lot of the policymakers, a lot of the folks out of Washington, say this is really all contingent on a second wave. So it seems like we can make the case for a bear market rally, but as long as we see this reopening kind of anthem continue, it's really hard to say that there's anything really getting in the way of this. Even today, we saw some headlines coming out of China, some tensions arising on the Taiwan front between Mike Pompeo and his counterpart. That really not stopping the rally either. So you are really seeing that this is really all about the reopening, really all about the virus.
And this is in the face of some warnings from the Fed late last week about possible asset inflation, essentially, some vulnerability in assets, and particularly things like commercial real estate and things like that. I mean, how much of this is because the Fed has just basically said, I'll write you a blank check?
A good chunk of it, a really big chunk of it, actually. A great example here is just in the Treasury market. We just had a huge $20 billion auction for 20-year bonds, and my colleague Beth Stanton wrote this great piece earlier this morning saying that the Fed actually has been buying $1.5 trillion worth of securities, worth of treasuries, and can actually buy up to 70% of whatever the new issue is. So we actually just saw that $20 billion worth of 20-year bonds issued, and we could actually see the Fed go in and buy up to 70% of that. So that's a dynamic you're seeing really across the markets. And of course, that is feeding into momentum to the upside for stocks as well.
So unfair question. At what point does this become modern monetary theory? I mean, if the Treasury's issuing and the Fed's buying, that sounds like a perpetual motion machine.
Well, that is a tough question. Of course, you throw that hardball at me. I got to get Joe Weissel on the show to answer that. The answer really is the focus really should be on what happens when everything looks great and the Fed has to unwind their position. That's really the big question here. Anyone can really call it anything that they like to. I'll leave that to the experts. But what's important to note here is this just based on the Fed alone? And when the Fed does decide to take a step back, will the rally continue, or is that when you see some really big positions getting cut? And that's the really big question of the day.
In the meantime, it looks like we have a ways to wait before the Fed steps back. It seems to be pretty willing to come back in, according to the testimony we had just yesterday in the Senate Banking Committee. Thank you so much, Kriti. As I say, it's always a treat to have Kriti Gupta with us. She's Bloomberg Live cross-asset reporter. And now we've got a special treat. We have Michael McKee, our chief policy and economic correspondent. He's going to be talking to Rob Kaplan, the president of the Dallas Fed. We have a lot of questions of the Fed right now, and it varies not just on who you're talking to, but where they sit. And that Dallas region is critically important. And so now we will go to Michael McKee with Rob Kaplan.
Thank you very much, Vonnie. And we are going to welcome now our special guest, the president of the Dallas Federal Reserve, Robert Kaplan, coming to us from his offices in Dallas. I note that you're back in your offices, and we are starting to reopen around the country. Governor Abbott wants people in Texas out and about. And I'm wondering, as we start this process, what it's like there, what corporate leaders, what even people who run mom and pop stores are telling you about how fast they see things coming back.
So I've been coming to the office. I live close by, and I have two small children. So I've been coming to the office for some number of weeks now. But even at the Dallas Fed, we really have limited our attendance to essential employees, cash, law enforcement, only those essential. And I think that's true of many businesses, even here in Texas, where there's certain kinds of businesses where you need to have people back in the office, manufacturing, for example. And there's other businesses that have been working all through this very effectively from home. And I think the attitude there, and my own attitude, is if we're effectively working, I don't think there's a rush to come back because we're productive and we're doing our job. And I don't see the compelling reason. I think a lot of businesses are doing that. The big difference I see here in Texas is retail stores, restaurants, hotels are opening. Many of us, including me, are giving it a try and going out to dinner. And so you're starting to see that, and you're seeing a lot more traffic on the streets and a lot more cars driving.
Well, how fast do you think then the economy recovers?
So here's the issue. For certain activities, with businesses reopening, I think you can see a good, slow, steady recovery in the third and the fourth quarters. What I'm worried about is, despite what the government may say or what the guidelines are, there's certain behaviors that consumers are going to be reluctant to engage in, whether it's shopping or going to entertainment or arts or anything where people are gathered. And this is an example for me. What the Feds have done on our lending programs has helped stabilize markets. The fiscal policy is key. But I think at this stage, to recover faster, the healthcare policies are central. And what do I mean by that? Ubiquitous testing, contact tracing, good procedures. And I'm one that is a little concerned. We're doing more testing in Texas, but I would love to see a national initiative, Manhattan Project, to really emphasize testing and quick testing in front of stores, restaurants, other facilities, so people have more confidence that when they go in, they're not walking into a situation where they could be at risk. I think until we have that, my concern is there will be limits to how fast we can recover, and that we'll recover, but without certain types of activities fully recovering, it'll just limit our GDP growth, and it will mean the unemployment rate will be more elevated than it would be otherwise.
Well, the president has argued it should be a state-by-state thing. Why do you think we need a federal effort?
So I'm talking broadly to local businesses. I've talked nationally to researchers. I've talked to the CDC. The issue on testing, there are lots of testing efforts going on at local companies. I can tell you that. I've talked to them. The issue is, how much money are they able to spend? And they're aware that their efforts to do the testing and to produce the testing, they're creating a product that may not have a demand 3 years from now. This is a product that has demand now, for at least until we get a vaccine. And I don't think it would take very much money in the billions, maybe at tens of billions, to create this product, scale it, and then make it ubiquitous everywhere. And I'm not saying we won't recover with the way we're doing it. We will. We're going to grow in the third quarter. We're going to grow in the fourth quarter. I'm looking ahead, though. We think the unemployment rate will peak near around 20%. We think we'll end the year around, say, 10%, as high as that. But I think to grind it down, fiscal policy will help. The Fed programs will help. But ultimately, money is not going to get consumers to engage in behavior they're not comfortable with. And I think we could spend a fraction of what we're spending on stimulus on testing. And I've said before, why not spend billions to avoid spending trillions?
I can't let you go without asking you about the oil patch. You're in the center of it. You might as well be the Federal Reserve Bank of oil as far as most people are concerned. Do you have any kind of forecast for where the industry goes, how many companies might go bankrupt if oil stays under $40? Kansas City Fed said the other day when it was under 30 that they expected 40% bankruptcy rate. Is that realistic?
It might be. So what's happening is we're seeing here in Texas, and we're seeing it globally, but we're seeing here in Texas lots of drillers shutting in, meaning it's not economic to drill, and they're just shutting down. And what we believe, we think total U.S. production will go from, say, the fourth quarter of last year, 12.8 million barrels a day. It will end this year at closer to 10.8 million barrels a day. The Permian Basin may shrink by as much as 1 million barrels a day. And so, yes, you will see bankruptcies, restructurings, and failures, not only in drillers, but those who service them. Having said all that, it's our own view that as demand returns, people begin to drive, activity resumes, which it must, we will work off the excess inventory as early as sometime in the second half of 2021 or early 2022, depending on the rate of growth. And so we actually think that you could see, and it's not surprising to us, you're seeing a firming in the price of oil. But in the meantime, this year, you're going to see lots of pain and restructurings and bankruptcies and challenges.
Well, if that firming continues, how quickly do the people who shut in those wells turn them back on?
Depends what the price goes to. And oh, by the way, a lot of folks in the industry have explained to me, once you shut in a well, it takes some time to unshut it in. But my guess is the magic price probably starts to be in the neighborhood of high 30s or in the 40s. You're going to see people resume. And it's our own forecast here at the Dallas Fed, even with that reduction of U.S. production by 2 million barrels a day, the